If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
When your company earns unlimited 2% cash back on all purchases with Capital One, that's serious business. So Stephen at SandCloud got a serious business card, the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One.
We used our 2% cash back to help build our retail presence.
Savvy, Stephen.
And we get big purchasing power, so our business can spend more and earn more.
The Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus.
Welcome to Air Checks. Here is more of the Gene Shepard Marathon on WOR in New York City. From August 4, 1964, the Sultan of Zanzibar has failed his driver's license test. The characteristics of the Slavus Americanus, a portrait in great detail.
You always have this delusion that's just it's just part of us. It's as much a part of us as the shell on the turtle is part of it. Hey, did you hear about that turtle the other day that this surgeon put a plastic shell on? He did. Yeah, I don't know what happened. The turtle caught on fire or something and lost his shell. He did. I'm telling you the truth. It was done with glasses or mirrors or something, and he got on fire, and they took his shell off, and they put another shell on it. It was a plastic shell, a polyethylene shell. It was very nice. You imagine this turtle going back to where all the other turtles are, and he shows up with this light blue polyethylene shell, and oh yeah. Well, of course, you know the problem of dealing with life as it is it's always going to leave us hanging out. It's going to leave us hanging out there on a limb. No question about it. Because you know, we want to deal with it like we deal with silly putty. I think silly putty is closer to life than anything else I know of, than marble, for example, because one thing about silly putty, it will assume any shape you want it to assume, but it always goes back to the original one. which is lumpy. Whereas marble has a tendency to stay the way it is, and it's just not like real life. Speak of real life, now here's one from Dallas. Now, we like to think that the Texas and the West is where the men are, don't we? I mean, this is where tough, hard guys are. Oh, they shoot from the hip. They do all the stuff here. Here's one from Dallas. Comes from the United Press here. It's Dallas. Barber David Schrock. I'm trying to use slight Texas accent here. Barber David Schrock refuses to give businessmen a crew cut to provide relief from summer heat in Dallas unless the customers bring a note of permission from their wives. Well, now you see, I suppose it can be argued that the real man does get a note from his wife. That would be the way the wife would determine a real man. Oh yes, I've seen this argument used time and again. I saw a little shrimp one day bending over the sink and the steam was rising. Of course, his wife is out in the living room watching television. He's washing the dishes. And somebody mentioned that. I remember one time at the office, Bob mentioned this is the guy who was the friend of this other guy. I don't want to bring the other guy's name. Oh, it's a terrible story. And he says, it's terrible the way Chuck has to work like that, wash all the dishes. And this lady looked at him rampant. She says, any real man does that sort of thing for his wife. Well, what kind of an argument are you going to do with that? He's crawling around on his hands and knees and licking her shoes and one thing. And of course, any real man would do that. Here's a little note here. I think when you try to deal with life, it just fails really. This is from London, United Press. The Sultan of Zanzibar, who came to Britain to live after his government was overthrown, has failed his driver's test. A member of his staff reported. Oh, jeez. Have you ever that if it happens, you lose your kingdom and then you don't get your driver's license? No, I'm not worried about the Sultan. I am merely pointing out that we there it is. There is the Alpha and the Omega. It's inexplicable. You don't think of the Sultan of Zanzibar even taking a driver's test, do you? All right. Well, you better start thinking. We've got. Of course. I think that's part of the slob world. There, again, we've got to go back to the slob issue here, and I don't like to rehash. I don't like to scrape in old coals and rake up old potato peelings here. I don't want to sit here and fiddle around with old used apple cores. But since last week we opened that Pandora box and mentioned briefly a few of the more salient characteristics of the Slavus Americanus, we might as well go a little bit further. The old idea that Mencken used to talk about boobism. He called it the boobus Americanus. And that was a phrase that Mencken used a great deal. But, of course, what he really meant was, in the terms of his boobism, was generally people who were against him. He referred to boobus Americanus, which, by the way, is also one of the salient aspects of the general Slav. He likes to define anything that is contrary to what he believes in as being the work of slobs, fools, and knaves. This is just an actual. Of course, he would never use the word knave. That's a very hard word for a slob to deal with. But in general, he likes to use four-letter expletive words that define the things that he does not like. Like he likes to say, "Oh, it's a nut." It's a favorite word among Slavs. Nut. That's always everybody else. It's a nut. Little short, simple words are really the province of the true Slav at work, even though he may use a large number of good, well-contrived words and excellent vocabulary. When it gets right down to telling what he doesn't like, he'll use the word nut or screwy. That's another one of his words. Way out is a Slav term. I have never known anyone who's way out to ever use the term way out. It's a Slav term. Way out meaning out of his realm, out of the Slav's ordinary rut. So anything that's way out. And incidentally, I noticed that almost all the things that are called way out by the Slavs are generally the most way in things. I was talking to a Broadway producer the other day, and he says to me, well, he says, this is a story about a way out girl. She wears blue jeans, goes around with her hair hanging on a pigtail like, and she wears those tennis shoes, a way out, plays like he's describing at least 99% of the girls in our country. It's called way out to him. Of course, one of the problems with the Slav is he's usually at least 15 or 20 years behind whatever is. Now, that was way out. That was truly way out, avant-garde, about 1938. And as far as he's concerned, it's way out to go with us. She's got, what are these, Levi's, the overall pants, the tight overall pants. She wears plays a banjo and a thing, a guitar. That's a guitar. That's way out. And you'll find this, of course, is very evident in the world of the automobile. Believe me, many slobs believe a guy who's got a Volkswagen is way out. That's a way out person who's got a Volkswagen there. And of course, he doesn't really recognize the fact that he's knee deep in Volkswagens, so he assumes that there's just a lot of way out people. A lot of way out. Of course, he defines way out people in his own way as a kind of slob. That's a slob person. And when you really ask him why they shouldn't, he's always usually a little angry about things like Volkswagens. He's a little bugged by this. And you say to him, well, why don't you like Volkswagen? Well, they look like a bug. Well, that's enough for him. You see, it's another one of those simple 4-letter words or 3-letter word, bug. It looks like a bug. And I one time asked one, well, what's the matter with the way bugs look? You know, they kind of like the look of a bug. After all, the Ford looks like a cheese box. So what do you mean? You're not? What's a bug? I look like bugs. A little thing that look cars, no bugs. And that's the end of that. They look like a bug. Of course, this has many ramifications. That if the Ford people in about 5 years bring out a car that looks exactly like a Volkswagen, he will say, well, it's a streamline. It's a streamline in the front and the back there. It's very streamlined. It's a very small streamline thing. And what used to be in short, what is most involved, that is what he will buy invariably. And the way out terms, anything that is outside of his realm. I've had slob types say things like this to me, and in general, as I say, they're usually a little bit behind times. One of the things I've heard just recently, one looked at me and he says, a lot of those hep beatnik types, they like all this way out. This way out jazz, this Benny Goodman, this noise stuff. And so he still thinks Benny Goodman is way out, and it's jazz and noise. It's all noise. That's another thing, that they'll put down any kind of sound they don't understand as noise. That's noise. All that noise stuff. And of course, quite often a slob will like the more popular classical music, providing it's very short. It has to be extremely short, and part of the slob problem, of course, is a very, very, almost a minuscule attention span. He cannot listen to anything that goes on for more than 3 minutes without it having to do one of two things. It makes his foot tap. That's very important. If music makes your foot tap, that's good music. Or he has to be able to whistle it. He assumes that if he can whistle it, that's also very good. Now, it seems to him very important to identify what he calls the melody. Now, it can be a banal, it usually is, a banal, trite, nothing piece of trash, the melody, but as long as he can identify it, then it becomes acceptable. That's good stuff to him. Now, when he works in painting, he's quite the same way. That if he doesn't recognize what is in the picture immediately, what is it? My kid can paint like that. That's a typical slob remark. His kid can paint that way. Slobs have a great deal of belief that their kids can do anything that any artist can do, and their kids can play music that way. My kid sitting down the piano can go boom, 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 boom like that. What's his name? This Thelonious Monk? What is his monk? What is his stuff? And that's the end of that. He deals with this very, very neatly and contrivedly. It's beautifully handled. Now, there's never any doubt in a slob's mind, ever, about anything, particularly artistically. He's never have any doubt, and if he comes out of a movie that he didn't understand, anything he does not quite understand, is, what is this? It doesn't mean nothing. Well, that means that Debbie didn't get Tab Hunter at the end, or vice versa, whatever. I don't know how it works anymore with Debbie and Tab, but they didn't get each other at the end, and so they thought, what is this? Who wants to go there? Speaking of slobs, this is WOR AM and FM New York, and Hi, George. There's a well-founded belief. Many of the Slavs, I've noticed too, have strong, very strong, didactic religious beliefs. This is a part of it, but only part of it. Now, generally, the religionists themselves, they're not really religious people. They believe in what they believe in. Many Slavs I know refuse to concede that somebody else has another religion that could be equally valid. This is an incredible concept to him. And he just assumes that anybody who is in his particular sect or his particular belief line is a good person. That's just a good person. I've heard people. I'll never forget one time they brought one of the famous gangsters kicking and screaming into a station in Chicago after having slayed 6, blasted 7 in breakout attempt. He killed 4 cops with pineapples. And he'd been tyrannizing the city for 6 years, and they brought him dragging, kicking, and screaming in. And a guy came on the radio and said, "But the one thing we've got to understand is that he is really a good Catholic." Which threw me, that confused me a little bit. And this is not an anti-Catholic remark. I mean, but I just happened to hear this one remark. I've heard people, a guy get up and scream for a lynching. Yeah, I've been in the presence of that happening at one point. Scream for a lynching and have great big firebrands and hold them. And I'll never forget one guy turning to me and saying, well, he says, you can say what you want about George, but George is a very good Methodist. And he's up there screaming and yelling and calling for blood, and so there you go. A Slav always believes that if you're in his sect, somehow you're a good person. Somehow you're a good person, yeah. If you're against the things he's against, he will accept you. Oh, yes, this is another thing, too. If you're against, let's say, the Whoopies, he says, look, I don't care, he's my friend, he's against the Whoopies. And that's good enough for him, which means that as long as he believes the way I believe, he's a good person, basically. That's one of the favorite words of the Slavs. A good person, basically. Oh, speaking of the voice of the devil, you have a couple of things in there. There you go, Skip.
Welcome aboard, sir.
Who is the ailman?
Your stateroom is ready, sir.
He could be you, a man with a thirst for a manlier brew.
The captain would like you to dine with him.
3 out of 4 men every time choose the bolder, keener tasting ale.
Can I get you anything, sir?
Ballantine.
You thirst for adventure, for something new. You try a Ballantine ale. This one's different. Bolder, keener, more to the point. Suddenly, you're a confirmed Ballantine ale man. Welcome aboard, ale man.
Who is the ale man? He could be you, a man with a thirst for a manlier brew. 3 out of 4 men every time choose the bolder, keener tasting ale. Ballantine.
The night of the iguana. An electrical storm spits lightning at the ocean, silhouetting 3 figures swaying in the sand. Maxine and her beach boys. In the cottage above them, the Reverend T. Lawrence Shannon struggles against the ropes that bind him, while Hannah, now unafraid, confesses the bottomless depth of her desire. A door closes and locks, and Charlotte's precocious curiosity about love finally climaxes into passionate reality. This is the night of the iguana.
Richard Burton, Ava Gardner, Deborah Carr, Sue Lyon. In Tennessee Williams, The Night of the Iguana. A John Huston Ray Stark production from MGM and 7 Arts.
Very serious show there. A showcase presentation starts Wednesday at selected theaters throughout greater New York. Boy, that curls your hair. Nobody knows more about life than Tennessee Williams. He's really right there. He's got a firm grasp on it. Well, now we move further out to sea here. I just thought you ought to have that raw. It's the way it is. It's the way it came right off the vine. Here, you want to hear some more comments about what the listener says about the slob world? He says one thing though about here's one from. He says, "Dear Shepherd, I'm one of those greasy kids, 16 years old, who lives in New Jersey." He says, "Well, I did it. I went back to the wild haven of slobism located in the swamplands of Flushing, the New York World's Fair. The fair offers subjects for the dedicated student and observer of slobism, dynamic and in action and quiescent. After a full day of studying the slob in his natural habitat, I concluded that there are two types of slobs, different yet alike. The first type is the true blue slob. He wears a beach hat with a beer can on top and a shirt which barely fits his well-fed, blubbery, beefy form. He doesn't walk, but he rather moves his bulk, like some sort of large plastic amoeba. He frequents the beer joints. Come on, let's have a beer. I got a big thirst on. Let's all have a beer." And he invariably is found in those long lines to the exhibits, which show a fairy tale future for the slob. The true blue slob is the first to yell, "Come on, let's move this here line." Just as he yells continually at traffic jams while driving his truck, or yells at his wife or his kids for having ideas divergent from his, or people who don't believe the same way he does politically. "Come on, let's move this here line, will ya?" Oh, by the way, I'll parenthetically will say this about the slob, too, that the weapons he uses against society, he is almost invariably horrified and offended when they're used against him. The slob does not think anything of cutting ahead in any line that he can cut ahead in. But let anybody cut ahead a line in front of him. The slob is usually a short-change artist who is deeply wounded when he's short-changed. And it's a one-way operation, I really believe. Oh, another thing I've noticed, too, about a slob, if I may interject something here, that I think is very important about the slob, is that he confuses the word guilt and responsibility. This confuses the slob a great deal. If you say to a man, "Well, don't you have any guilt feelings for let's say the miners of West Virginia who are out of work?" He will turn to you and say, "That's not my fault. What have I got to do with that? What fault is it of me that they've done that? It's not." You see, he confuses the word responsibility. Obviously, it is not he's not responsible for them being out of work, but he feels no sense of involvement with them. He feels no sense of responsibility for them, none whatsoever. And the slob is always yelling about the steel workers pricing themselves out of the market. He'll say, "Oh, the steel workers all the time getting a raise. What do you mean? Crying out loud. Oh, you think I feel responsible for them? Okay, go put the automation in there. They raised the price so high, they are nothing but striking for dough all the time." It's always some other union that's a sinister union that's wanting too much money. It's the other union who wants too many coffee breaks. I heard one of the engineers here the other day coming back from his third coffee break in the hour telling me that the trouble is the reason he's not going to buy a new car this year is because the steel workers have asked for too much dough. And he says, "Those guys," he said, "for crying out loud, half of them," he says, "they work a 30-hour week." Well, I happen to know this guy. He has been working a 10-hour week for the last 40 years. And it's the truth. And if you ever mention it up here, there would be a silence on the 23rd or the 24th floor. You could cut with a butter knife. You know, what is this, a nut? That's a nut shepherd again. That's a nut. Well, so the problem is it's always a one-way problem, and he confuses guilt with responsibility. Now, there's a new kind of glib slob who believes that because he is inherently a better person, he's more educated, he has better taste, he has more sensitivity, that any problems that have befallen less fortunate people are not his fault, because they're obviously not as good as he is. Now, I'm talking about the dynamic objectivist slob. This is the kind who will read endless, turgid, great potpourris of hashed-up pseudo-philosophy and believe that by reading this, he has made himself a superior person. And he never. Oh, and there's a new kind of slob that believes that they never grow old either. That the problems that have befallen other people will never befall this person. And so he's against medical care for anybody, because he's never been sick. So he doesn't see any use. Why? He says, these old people, he says, why? It's all... And all other people who are on unemployment are always phonies. They're always phonies. They're lazy. They're bums. They don't work. Because he's never lost his job yet. He's never had that problem yet. It's funny how quickly a slob changes into an anti-slob immediately after his paycheck stops. Oh, boy, you see a large, sudden change there, a real quick one, which I have seen from time to time. But the true slob, immediately upon getting a job again, reverts to his old ways almost instantly. He has no memory at all for the past, none whatsoever. His memory doesn't go past last Wednesday. He just cannot conceive of anything happening. And of course, he has nothing but scorn for people who are old. Old people he usually has scorn for, unless he is an old slob, in which case he has scorn for nothing but youth. So whatever he is okay, and whatever he isn't is bad. And so I will hear countless old slobs say, yes, the kids, what are you going to do with the kids? They're no good. And you wonder, was he ever a kid? Well, he has forgotten it totally. It's a part of that no memory thing. So he switched that off. He was never a kid. He was always a 51-year-old angry man with bad feet. So that's as far as he can ever go. Now the young kid slob, the young kid slob cannot conceive of himself ever being 58 and out of a job. That's the young kid who will always be drawn in to certain kinds of extremist philosophies which teach him that. Which say to him that, yes, it's a young people's movement. Well, you're not always young, kid. And the laws that you put in are going to work against you when you ain't. So be careful. Part of the slob is he always believes he'll always be what he is. He will always be exactly where he is, which is fat, well-fed, and he's got the world by everything. You know what he's got it by. He's got it by it. And he figures it'll always be this way because he's inherently a better person. That's why he's got it that way. Could never be luck. Could never be the fact that his old man left him $100,000, which might disappear like the snow in August. And almost invariably, every really good slob I know has been cast into a role, often quite by accident, but he never concedes this. If his father left him $16 million, and in 5 years, he raised it to $18 million. It's because of his fantastic business acumen. And he never mentions, he says, why, before I was 23, I had made $2 million. Well, of course, if he left the $16 million in the bank, he would have made $1.5 million on interest alone. But this is never taken into account. It's always because of a basic superiority of the individual himself. And of course, this kid goes on to bring out some great points about this. He says, the slob, he's always yelling at traffic, always constantly yelling at people all around him. Whenever they cut in his line, the slob is always on the defensive to make sure no one passes him. For the world's sole purpose, he thinks, is to cut him off. But I won't let him. That's what he says. How many times have you heard the slob say, listen, Mac, nobody's going to push me around. Of course, the implication that everybody else can get pushed around because they're, but me? No, not me. Nobody's going to push me around, boy. Nobody's going to tell me what to think. Of course, it's impossible even to tell him to think. The slob often confuses, that's another problem with the slob. He often confuses completely held beliefs with thinking. He really does. Because I think a guy's out of work and wants to apply for Social Security, he's lazy. Well, he hasn't really thought about it at all. But he believes it. And he confuses that with thinking, because thinking is a slippery word in itself. Why doesn't somebody look that up in the dictionary, think? And then look up belief. You'll find that they don't quite coincide. They often don't, as a matter of fact. That bothers a lot of people. Here's he goes on. He says, for some reason, the true blues slob was out in rare form at the Bell Telephone Pavilion. Of course, I think this is the truth. I think that the telephone brings out the extreme of slobism. The slobs love telephones more than they love almost anything else. Almost more than they love beer. Most yelling, because the telephone is an instrument of yelling. It is an instrument to yell at the world, and it's also a shield. One of the most fascinating things I myself noticed out at the fair was endless collections of telephone booths. Now, they're just like any other phone booths. And who are those people calling? Large numbers of people are calling on the telephone. Now, they're not people calling back home to Cleveland to talk to their family. That's the immediate thing you think. No, a bunch of 16-year-old kids are all on the phone. Whole lines of them, 16, 17 years. Obviously, they've come from Flushing. Who are they calling in Flushing? And they're on the phone there. They're all lined up on the phone. They've come all the way to the World's Fair. Here's the Unisphere. The world is spread out, and they're on the phone. What are they doing? Well, of course, that's part of the Slav world. It's very important to have that telephone as close to you as you can, and it's usually used mostly for yelling at the world. Not necessarily, it may not sound like yelling, but keeping in touch with the known world. It's very important, and the known world, of course, may be just old Fat Manny back home. You make sure that he's still there. He says a lot of little discouraging things. All right, he goes on to say, he says, the true blue Slav was out in rare form in the Bell Telephone Pavilion. In one exhibit, the Slav saw his own voice, which of course is used almost exclusively for ordering beer and yelling, transformed into a pic on an oscilloscope. This enthralled the true blue Slav. See, this guy's watching this particular Slav. This enthralled the true blue Slav. They have your voice broken up on an oscilloscope. As the young lady passed the mic around, she asked the people to recite their names into it. Everything went along smoothly. All recited their names and watched it on the screen until the good old Slav got his chance. "How are you, baby?" he yelled in his longshoreman's accent. That's the Slav there. All right, there he's at work. Another exhibit featured an acoustical chamber. As I walked through, I yelled my lungs out. I'm not sure if I did this out of a healthy curiosity or if I thought they were trying to put one over on me. The second reason scared me. They're trying to put one on. The Slav always believes that everybody's trying to put one over on him. And another thing, the Slav, I've noticed so many Slavs have a great fear of doctors. Anybody who has actual learning, he's very suspicious of. He always claims, well, you know those doctors. What do they know? What do those doctors know? Why, my Uncle Emil, I'll tell you about Uncle Emil. Uncle Emil was never sick in his life. One day he got a little pain in his chest. He had a little pain. Oh, never sick in his life. Well, what did Min say? Min says go to see a doctor. Well, he knew better. But he went to see the doctor anyway. 4 hours later, he's dead. Never went to a doctor in his life. What do you mean the doctors know? So they suspect doctors, and many of them believe that doctors cause the diseases. They really do. That they think that if they don't go to the doctor, they won't get cancer. This is that old myth that you remember at one time they cut Emil open. They cut him open. The minute they cut him open, it just spread like that. He was dead. They let him go back to work. He'd have been all right to this day. I tell you that. Why, I met a guy at work one day. Told me that he cured his sister. They took carrot juice. They drank nothing but 1 week. She's gone. Everything fine. All the spots disappeared. She's still working. Doctors, you can't tell me. Well, they suspect anybody who has any actual education. By actual education, I mean any actual skill or something which somehow has a magical quality to it. Now, they respect guys who have technical skills, like, listen, I know a TV repairman, this guy. Oh, yeah, they have great respect for guys who can fix their car. Fantastic respect for those who can repair their radio. But guys that repair them, they're always a little suspicious of. Now, on the contrary, quite often a Slav will maintain his belief in a doctor or somebody of that nature far away and above and beyond the call of duty. He believes that his doctor is the only doctor that can cure sciatica. And this is almost a mystical belief. And if they believe all the way. You see, this is another element of the Slav. They believe completely, thoroughly, utterly, without any question at all, that his doctor is the greatest doctor that was ever. He just couldn't conceive of a doctor who could do what old Doc Slicker does. He just couldn't conceive of him. Now, again, that kind of, in a sense, is a belief in magic or magical beings. That if you said, well, the doctor down at the corner went to a better school than Doc Slicker, and, it's a little bit more recently, no, I like them old doctors. They know more about it. The old doctors know better. And he really believes that even though old Doc Slicker took his degree by a correspondence course from the Indianapolis School of Internal Medicine and Psychopathics, and he got his degree in 8 weeks by mail. Doesn't make any difference. He's an old doctor. And that's another one of the parts of the slob, too, is his great distrust of new things. Either he believes in new things beyond all, again, it's that problem of belief. He either suspects all new things or he believes in them beyond all suspicion of a doubt. And if he does not believe in any of the new things, some people, I've heard a really good slob at work maintain that there is not even such things as germs. Oh, yes, there's no such things as germs. And not only that, this is within the last 2 weeks on the radio. And this one said not only were there no germs, but in addition to that the doctors all created this idea of the germs because it makes more business for them. So that's, again, the slob's attitude. They're after me. That it's a gigantic plot that they have promulgated to put over a specious set of sneaky treatments, and that it's all a big money-making scheme. You just let people eat celery, they'll be all right. Why, they didn't have this stuff before they discovered germs. Well, you go back 300 years ago, nobody ever died of tuberculosis 300 years ago. Of course, they never knew about it. People just died, and they just dug a hole and threw them in, and that was the end of it. But there are a lot of people who believe this kind of thing. Now, don't say for 1 minute that this is the ignorant I'm talking about. No, most of these people have good educations I'm discussing. I do not confuse in my discussion here the ignorant with the slob. I'm talking about people who are educated and whatnot, who definitely hold these beliefs. And so you want to hear more about what this kid saw at the fair? Listen to this one. He says, while I heard other slobs going through the acoustical chamber yelling as they went through, I wondered if this slobism was catching. And I caught it because I was in such a fine breeding place of slobs. Or perhaps we are all slobs, and in one way or another managed to hide it. That, I suspect, is closer to the truth. Now, it may seem, of course, he goes on, he says, the second type of slob conceals his slobism slightly, so that it is a great sport to watch for him. He says he's really a difficult and interesting one to catch. Although he may have gone to college, the educated slob is still a slob. He simply goes to a beer garden instead of a beer joint. And he tries to show that he is cultured by having Lowenbrau, as he says it, instead of Rheingold. When he is in a line, he yells how these slobs can be so offensive, while he himself, of course, boldly cuts into the front of all line, and the one thing he wants is a press pass to cut in front of everybody. This is another kind of a slob. He's very angry when anybody gets ahead of him. But by George, if he can get a hold of a pass, he's out there right ahead of everybody in the line, and invariably. He says he may have been to Paris. He makes sure, of course, that all the million people around him hear it loudly. This fare is invariably, while he's standing in line at the Bell Telephone exhibit, is compared to the one in Brussels. And the fare buses are matched to the metro, which he rode on once. The educated slob, trying to show his lack of slobism, becomes an even bigger slob because it's subtler and more dangerous. This is the new cult of slobs. I salute them. I propose that the fair be maintained as a refuge and meeting place for slobs of all stripe throughout the world. It's a 16-year-old kid. It's a real good letter. And he has pegged part of the slob world. Now, this problem, of course, of the slob hiding his slobism. I guess what basically a slob really is a man who believes that he is better than other people. Now, many small communities just outside of New York in the suburban world are filled with these people. Of course, they would not consider themselves slobs. Darien, Westport, Princeton, they refer to the rest of the world as slobs. They really do. The people who don't appreciate a good play. And, of course, they're all sitting there wearing their wash and wear suits. And if you ask them 10 minutes after the play what the play said, they'd have no idea of this. But most of them can tell you who was in it or who wrote it. Now, that's let's say, that is the detail slob. That is the slob who is very much involved in, let's say, the mechanics of the theater. He's involved in the theater itself. Certainly not involved in anything to be said in the theater. He's not involved in any attitude or philosophy that the man has to offer. He's interested in who plays the part. And a person who is that type of slob, who believes that if he believes in the right kind of actor, he is a good theater goer. And so if he likes Anne Bancroft and does not like Doris Day, the assumption being that he has more insight. You see, and more insight. If you say to him, well, you know, it's a terrible thing to think about, but Cocteau wrote a Doris Day movie, he wouldn't know what to say. If Cocteau did, and it is conceivable that Cocteau would have had he been given the chance. I've known a couple of people who knew Cocteau. But the facts of the matter are we like to that kind of slob will drift towards, and he is a great name dropper. He is a name dropper of writers, among other things. He believes in reputations, and this is a slightly higher type of slob. That if the New York Times, he is totally reads the Times book review section from back to front, and whatever that section has to say is somehow a kind of gospel. It is a kind of absolute, unimmutable gospel. Now, he always believes in the right things. He is always almost aggressively liberal, but not too aggressive. He's aggressive in a kind of second-hand, abstract way. He believes in good things, like people shouldn't tar and feather each other. In Birmingham, he says. He's very angry about Southern politicians who make speeches. And yet, on the other hand, while he is at his political meeting, he would not like to hear, say, for example, let's say Robert Welch could not come and give a speech at his liberal political gathering. Oh, absolutely not. In fact, one of my friends here the other day, was a funny thing. He was a very, very liberal young guy who was in one of these Darien or Westport groups and so on, and he's a member of the Young, Hard-Hitting Political Thinkers Club out there. And he came to Barry Farber and said, Barry, we'd like to have, it's a young, hard-hitting, liberal, fantastically dynamic group. Now, most of us are what we call the young progressive Republicans. He says, we're interested in new ideas, and would you suggest a speaker? Well, Barry thought for a minute, and he said, yeah, let's see, who can I get? How about Malcolm X? Well, well, there was a brief moment of silence, and he says, well, I'll see the committee. After the last that ever came out of that one. So most generally, the problem of the slob is that he often, even though he thinks he listens to other people, he really doesn't. He really finds it very difficult to listen to the other side. If he listens to the world, it's almost always to one side. He will read only, let's say, if he's a liberal, he will read the Reporter, he will read maybe the Village Voice, he will read the New York Post. And that's the extent of it. He refuses to, like say, if somebody came to him and says, how about reading the National Review here? He'd say, oh, that ragged review. And he throws it off to one side. He would not even bother to read. He would be afraid to read it, I guess. It would just make him mad. He'd have a stroke. Now, on the other hand, very few guys who read the National Review would even get within a 10-foot pole throwing distance of, let's say, the Reporter magazine. And all of them consider themselves very hip, thinking people. They really think hard and long and fast. And now, gee, I wish I had more time, because there's more to this. There's the religious side of Slavism. There is these are all. Now, I shouldn't even use such a word. I hate to use such a word, but I think one of the illusions that's beginning to grow in the world, and I suppose on both sides of the Slav fence, is that there are more Slavs than ever before. This is one feeling that is evidenced by both types of Slav, that there are more than ever before. Now, I submit that the reason this is so is that there is a growing group of people in the country who do have a decent education. Now, the education may be an education in life itself. Now, you can live for 100 years and not have any life education. This is something that has to be pointed out. There are other people, however, who can live 10, 15 years in life and receive a doctorate. They can get that philosophy doctorate par excellence. They have noticed, they have observed, they have assimilated, they have reacted to, and have come to some conclusions about life based on what they have seen, not what they believed they wanted to see, or not what they believed that they saw, but literally on what they saw. And so there's a growing group, and they seem to, both sides of the Slav world, to be more than ever Slavs. And so I suspect that more and more we will be able to speak to each other less and less. And I'm not saying what group I'm in. I'm saying like all true human beings, I'm sure that if you can have 10 feet, you have 10 feet, and one is in each camp. One you kick more, one you hold more, one you know is more there. But nevertheless, no one can divorce himself from any one. Then there's the true technical Slav, who, if a person does not pronounce a word correctly, that other person is a Slav. That's if they don't put the commas in the right place, that's a terrible Slav. Of course, the man may have come out with gigantic, wonderful, fantastic ideas. Who knows what kind of speaking voice Christ had? Who knows whether he used good grammar, even for the time? Who knows? But the facts of the matter are that that's another kind of Slav who will put down the greatest, most all-encompassing ideas in the world because they weren't punctuated right, or because the capitalizing wasn't correct. And so, who knows? Yet, all of us get irritated when that happens, in one way or another. So where does it stop? The only point of real danger is when one group of Slavs gather in one little tight knot and proclaim themselves the super people, and they're going to clean up the whole mess. Then get your tin hat out.
From August 13, 1964, Memories of Vic and Sade, Bluetooth Johnson, Four-Fisted Frank Fuddleman, Gloria Golden.
Other famous character that was the boyfriend of Rush in Vic and Sade. This is Smelly Clark, who was my buddy. And speaking of that, listen, I'll tell you, I know why the angry people of the world are the people who get up early in the morning. I'm sorry. I cannot imagine a dynamic dictator getting up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and putting his socks on and combing his hair and saying, well, I think I'll wait until after supper before I shave. No, because there's something in the air. I'm telling you, I am coming along 6th Avenue. It's a fantastic morning. The sun is beating down. Oh, boy, it's the kind... Have you noticed that all women look at least 150% sexier in the morning when you're coming to work? Just a thing. I don't know what it is. I think it's the way the sun hits them. Or maybe it's the way the sun hits the top of my head. I don't know what it is. Oh, before we get into other and more controversial topics, how about a little whoopee note here?
Oh, well, let me put it another way. The Republican, the Republican, I think the party, because if we don't fight, then we've got to pay the piper.
Well, sir, isn't it true that it'll be a better party if the hostess employs a little accent?
Well, let me make this perfectly clear. I think people should be employed regardless of their accent.
No, I mean if she uses accent on the food.
Oh, yes. Well, I wouldn't care to comment one way or the other.
You have heard of accent, though, in the red cylindrical container?
Well, I wouldn't care to say that I had, and then, on the other hand, I know accent is a seasoning of some sort.
Oh, not actually, sir. It has no flavor of its own.
Oh, yes, I recall. Accent brings out the flavor nature's already put in the beef or string beans, whatever. I think it's important to bring these facts out in the open. It's one of the basics of democracy.
Part of the real grassroots?
Well, I suppose it will bring the flavor out in grassroots. I really wouldn't care to be quoted on that.
Could you give us a definite statement on accent?
Well, perhaps, possibly, no.
But you are going to pick up some accent.
We'll see.
What was all that about? I mean, sometimes you have a feeling that you're caught in some kind of gigantic, surrealistic washing machine, some kind of a Maytag that's got you by the foot. Speaking of this surrealistic world, I'm looking at the sun, coming. Oh, it's just a fantastic day, and my stomach is flat, and my blood is flowing like mad through my veins, and my eyes are shining this morning. It's a great morning, and in my soul is playing my kazoo. Something like... And I'm walking along, and it's on 6th Avenue, you see. And then I see this enormous tidal wave of human beings flowing up and down 6th Avenue, back and forth, all going to whatever nefarious place they're going. You wonder what they're all about to do, you know. And it suddenly hit me. A terrible thought hit me, Tony. Maybe this is why I will never be an official morning time guy, you know. Morning time people have a certain ebullient, constant optimism. They give you the time at 8:16 as if it is a new concept. Every morning, and it's 8:16. I said, well, for crying out loud, we finally reached it, and wait till we get to 8:18. That's a great moment. And let me tell you, wait till we hit 8:32. And now we go on with the Norman Luboff Choir. Well, you have to have a certain outlook. You see, well, anyway, I'm walking along. I don't know what. Yeah, well, I guess it is a certain outlook. So I'm walking along the street there, and I see all these people coming at me. And it immediately hits me. This is a city of over 11 million people, you know, including Teaneck. And I guess we have to include Teaneck. I mean, they mean well. Come on now, Tony. It's not their fault. And so we're walking along, and I see these people come, and it suddenly hits me. How many of these guys, it's Thursday morning, are heading for the office to be fired today? Only they don't know it. There has to be, out of 11 million people, there has to be a certain percentage of guys over whose neck the axe is not only hovering, but is rapidly descending. And so I'm walking along there, seeing the old kazoo is going, oh, boy. And off to my left, I see a little shop. Now, here's the kind of thing you see in the morning. You don't see this at 2 in the morning. I'm sorry. There's a little shop, you know, these little junk shops they've got all over around here in town where they're selling used mittens and all kinds of stuff like that, you know, Okinawan mugs with little handles, and when you drink out of them, they play Yes Sir, That's My Baby, and all that great stuff. You say, well, right out in front, listen to this scene, right out in front on a little table, they had a big pile of stuff, and there were must have been at least 15 people standing around looking very excitedly out on the sidewalk at this pile of stuff. And I sort of looked over to see what it was. I don't want to get caught in any big scene at this early in the morning. And I looked over, and there's a big sign that says, pseudo ivory oyster forks. Well, I don't know how many people need an oyster fork to begin with, but a pseudo ivory oyster fork. And they did not say imitation. They said pseudo ivory oyster fork. And I thought, well, now, isn't that a description of it all? A pseudo ivory oyster fork rampant across a sea of dust mops. So get together, man. Press the button and we're off on another
Today
commercial.
We have with us the man responsible for Heinz' new Polish-style dills.
Here at Heinz, we're pickle people. To pickling we are true. Every pickle is pickle
that's a sparkles to you. Nothing more exciting in the morning than a singing pickle. I recall coming home. Oh, Pegeen knows. Bye, George. Pegeen, raise your hand. Once again, you get a gold star. Both you and Ed get gold stars now. She identified who Smelly Clark's best friend was outside of Rush. And you can really tell the real Americans, can't you? You really can. They don't chicken around with this little stuff. Yes, I thought it was one of the great names in American fiction was Bluetooth Johnson. Bluetooth Johnson was Smelly Clark's best friend, and they were all, well, it was a triumvirate. Bluetooth, Johnson, Smelly Clark, and Rush. And there was another guy, one other guy, and his first name started with an M. And who was their favorite movie star, and where did she appear continually in a movie called Hearts Aflame? Hearts Aflame. And what was the name of their favorite fictional character? They were constantly reading passages from the stirring books. I will give you a quote here. I will delete the name for those of you who want to test your infinite memory for American trivia. Blank blankety blank stood atop the ramparts. He turned slowly, his great massive jaw tightening in anger as he spoke. Lady Margaret, do not look at these rampaging aborigines. The sight could easily curdle your blood. He whirled and, withdrawing his saber from the scabbard, stood ready to defend the honor of the beauteous Lady Margaret.
Honey, I'll meet you on the beach. I've got to stop for cigarettes.
Okay.
And this time, make it Salem. Let's try something different for a change.
Try something different for a change. Light up for Salem for a change. Salem soft that freshes your taste. Try the soft taste of Salem for a change.
Next time you buy cigarettes, enjoy the refreshing difference of Salem filter cigarettes. Salem's softness freshens your taste. Ahead of Salem's modern filter, there's a rich tobacco blend, smooth with menthol, plus special paper that breathes in fresh air with every puff.
Try something for a change. Light up for Salem for a change. Freshens your taste. Try the soft taste of Salem for a change.
Smoke Salem filter cigarettes.
I'm going to get fired yet. Speaking of guys, you know, suddenly an awful thought hit me, Tony, on the way in when I just told this little thing about all the guys coming in who are about to be fired. I noticed that the executive phone is ringing in the control room in there, the one with the red line on it. The one that says switch to emergency program immediately. We will pick up transcribed organ moves now. Speaking of transcribed organ moves, I don't know whether or not most people have the same memories that I have. Of course, memory is a tricky thing. You just can't trust it for well, I almost said what you can't trust it for, but I better not say it. But I can remember there was a guy in Chicago.
Well, sir, it's late afternoon as we enter the small house halfway up in the next block now. And here in the living room we find Mrs. Victor Gook and her son, Mr. Rush Gook. Sade, who's established in her husband's easy chair beneath the floor lamp, nods over a novel she received as a Christmas present, while young Rush, lying at full length of the Davenport, gazes at the ceiling and thinks thought. But suddenly sounds are heard in the kitchen. Listen.
Hey, in here, Doc. Your mother home? She's asleep.
I'm not either.
Well, you look like... Is she upstairs?
No. What's the big commotion?
Oh, no, kiddo.
No. Are you going?
Listen, there's a special lodge meeting called for this evening.
We're playing 500 with Fred Ruthie this evening.
Well, that'll have to be called off. L.W. Eakins from Chicago headquarters is in town. Look, you two guys will have to jump in and help a fella out. I've got to wear my regalia and memorize a special ritualistic greeting and everything else. Have to be down at the hall by 4:45. It's almost 4 now. Andy, hop up from there and stand at attention and be ready to receive orders.
You want me to go up?
I want you to get me my lodge stuff from upstairs, make a telephone call to Hank Gutstop, and dig volume 7 out of my lodge library, out of the bookcase, and 69 other things. Kiddo, you give me a hand too, won't you?
We got an engagement with Fred Ruthie. You know yourself.
Well, that'll have to be canceled. I'm sorry, but it can't be helped.
I better phone him right now, then. Give him a chance to make other plans.
All right. Goose cutter, let's not stand around with our teeth in our mouth. Trot along and...
Second, Vic, till I get through calling Ruthie.
Well, I got no time to waste.
Well, I'm not going to have you fellas plowing around upstairs and tearing the house apart. There's stacks of Christmas presents in every single clothes closet, and I'm the only one that knows...
Okay, but make it snappy. Rush, get me volume 7 out of the bookcase.
Okay. 2572X, please. Correct.
I have to learn an official greeting by heart. And I have to phone Hank Goodstop and dictate an official greeting for him to memorize. Maybe you can do that.
What's all this that's going on now? What excuse shall I give him? You can't...
L.W. Eakins is in town.
Who's he?
One of the major executives of the Chicago headquarters of the Sacred Stars.
Hello, lady. I bet you were taking a nap.
Volume 7 now.
That's so? Well, Rush and me been doing the same thing. Vic went downtown right after dinner and just this minute got home.
This is what I have to memorize.
Yeah.
Paragraph, huh? Yeah.
Oh, my, I bet you were. How long did they stay?
Run up quick now and bring me down my lodge regalia. All of it.
Well, I should think so.
Boots, sword, tunic, plumed hat.
Your pants ain't available.
Golly, yes.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm lending them to Tom Hackett.
Happens every time.
Who's Tom Hackett?
Butcher over in Middleton Butcher Shop. He needed them to be Santa Claus.
Hey.
Well, what did Fred think?
Say.
Hey, a person's trying to talk over... Excuse me, Ruthie. Vic's trying to say something in just a second. What's the matter?
Are my lodge pants upstairs?
I suppose they're upstairs if you put them upstairs.
You lent them to Tom Hackett. Don't you remember?
Oh, golly, that's right. He took the part of Santa Claus, and I...
Well, this ain't the
You can drop by and pick them up. His landlady will give them to you.
His landlady can go jump in the lake. I haven't got
We'd like
time
it through here, Vic. Ruthie's waiting on the wire.
You may inform Lucy that
Lady,
this what you have
I'm
to memorize?
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, little frenzied brother of mine, wring your
Sure.
touching hands and listen for the call of the golden oriole. As maidens dance by the plashing
Oh, what?
pool, and the mischievous tarantella.
Rush, will you be quiet? Both of you be quiet. Say, lady, I better tell you why I phoned. Yeah. We're not going to be able to play 500 this evening. No. Well, it's like this. Vic's Lodge is having a special meeting. Yeah, some fella from Chicago's in town, and I guess he's... Who's the fella, Vic?
Will you get through there and explain about my pants?
I asked you a question. Who's the Chicago fella?
L.W. Eakins.
Is the big, large muckety-muck?
Yeah.
He's some man named Mr. Eakins, some big muckety-muck in the lodge. Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, look, this don't make any difference to you and Fred, does it? Uh-huh. Well, I thought I'd better get in touch with you right away so you could make other plans. Yeah.
Will you make that snappy?
Later on the week it'll be grand. Surely. You bet. Well, you explain to Fred. Yes. All right, Lucy. All right. Goodbye. There's no call to work yourself into a stool. You can pick up your lodge pants on the way downtown.
I have to dress here.
All right, let Rush trot over after him.
Trot over after him, Rush.
Tom Hackett lives on North Center Street, don't he?
I haven't the remotest idea.
Don't you,
Yeah.
Shall I go there first, or shall I go to Smelly Clark's house first?
Smelly Clark's house.
Plumed hat.
Didn't you bring that back? Oh, my.
What's this mystery now?
Well, don't jump through the ceiling, but Rush, let Smelly Clark take your
You
plumed
give me
hat.
permission, Mom.
Yeah, but I certainly thought you'd use your head enough to get it
Rush,
back.
let Smelly Clark take my plumed hat to do what?
To use as an ornament on his Christmas tree. See, they wanted something to put on the tip top of the tree to make
You may
it...
round me up my plumed hat in my lodge rope without another second's delay.
Hadn't I better go
out? I will make a little speech about what I think of people who lend out private possessions of others to every half-wit in
Well,
town.
goodness, I never expected
I
that
will
you-
make my speech later. Right now, however, I'm very closely pressed for time and would like to ask you to do me a favor.
What is it?
Telephone Hank Gutstop and read him this paragraph. He's supposed to memorize it.
I don't like Hank Gutstop, Dick.
It won't hurt you to call him on the telephone, will it?
Well, I don't like him, and he knows I don't like him.
And
And
my own wife won't cooperate with me in the matter of the greatest importance.
what you want me to tell him?
I want you to read something to him. You'll have paper and pencil and write as you dictate. Here's the place right here.
Don't have to read a whole book to him, do I?
Just this paragraph I'm pointing to.
What's it supposed to be?
Regular prescribed official greeting from an exalted little dipper to a visiting dignitary. Hank has to memorize.
Hey,
What's the better phrase?
well, this is that Greek junk.
Latin junk.
You expect me to make out a bunch of outlandish gibberish
It's simple as pie. Read it just like you'd read English.
kick over the people's bank building before I
It
try?
sounds just like it looks. The first word is hic. H-I-C. Hic. Read it just like you'd read anything else. Here. Hic dignitas apollondum clactimian hobo. Ues agricola upcu hunc. Sim spittle defidus in slab dum cornicum.
I won't do it.
Sadie, surely after lending my lodge pants to a perfect stranger to be Santa Claus in, and giving my plumed hat to a hyena to put on his Christmas tree, you won't
I'll read
refuse
something in American, but I'll kiss a cow before I'll make a ninny out of myself with that Greek junk.
Okay, I'll memorize Hank's greeting. You can memorize my greeting. We'll switch speeches.
Yours printed in American?
Yeah.
Let's see it once.
Right here. Oh, little frenzied brother of mine, wring your clutching hands and listen to the call of the golden Orion as maidens dance by the plashing pool. And the mischievous tarantula calls...
I'm not going to read that either.
What?
I'm not going to read that either.
Sadie, can it be possible?
Yes, you may call him that old Hank Gustav on the telephone and call him pet names and tell him to wring his hands and dance with the girls and play in the splashing pool.
Was that Rush?
Huh?
Rush?
Yeah.
He hasn't left the house yet.
Well, I expect...
What is the idea, sir?
I brought you your boot.
My boot?
Your large boot.
Where was it?
In the basement. I knew it was down there, so I hunted all over the furnace room till I found it. There you are.
Where is my other boat?
That's the big mystery. I looked every doggone place I knew.
Where is my other boat?
I let Miss Husher have it.
What for?
To hang over the fireplace at Christmas time. It's always been a custom in her family to use boots instead of stockings for Santa Claus to put his presents in.
Hackett has my pants, Nellie Clark has my plumed hat, and Miss Husher has my other boot. Is that correct?
Well, goodness, you didn't give a person warning you wanted everything all at once. If I'd had the slightest thing.
Where's my sword?
Right upstairs in your bottom dresser drawer. It's all wrapped up nice and ready to use. Shall I go get it?
How about my robe?
Oh, your robe?
My robe.
Charlie Reed just come borrowed it.
And my tunic?
Oh, what'd you do with his tunic, Rush?
You sent me over to Miss Brighton's with it.
Oh, she wanted to use it.
Hackett has my pants. Nellie Clark has my plumed hat. Miss Husher has my boot. Charlie Raiderscum has my robe. And Miss Brighton has my tunic. I haven't much large regalia left. I haven't...
Telephone's ringing.
Yes, the telephone is ringing.
I'll answer it. It's probably Ruthie.
You don't need to look that as a me, girl. I'm not implicated.
Hello? Yes? Oh, yes, he is. Just a second. For you.
Hank Gustav?
I think so. Yes, this is Hank Gustav. Recognized his voice.
He wants his official speech. Read it to him.
Oh, Vic, I just can't read that Greek chunk over the telephone.
Here's the book.
Vic, I just can't.
Here's the place.
I'll read the American.
Take this.
I'll read about the maidens in the splashing pool.
Read what I'm giving you.
Vic, I just can't.
Read.
Hank? Pick, Dignitas, Apollo Gum, Cruff, Simeon, Hobo, Curious, Agricola, Up Q, Hump, Sim, Fiddle, and Slob, Dumb, Cornucopia, Itch.
Which concludes another brief interlude at the small house halfway up in the next block.
From August 18, 1964, Monster Mothers. The literary scene and the undue influence of the New York Times Book Review. Part of the opening and closing themes have been deleted.
Dee-dee-da-da-da-da-da. Bring it up, Dick, all the way. All the way up. Bring it up, up. Up. Me, mic off. Out. Is the music off? Oh, fine. All right. I'm ready to go here. Listen, I don't know whether or not we should approach this head-on, or whether we should approach it obliquely. Or is it obliquely, as they say in the Army? But I don't know whether we should do it head-on, whether we should go right into the bushes, whether we should attack it with all the venom we have, or whether we should just relax and let it happen to us. I see where another writer is being hailed for writing another anti-mother book. Have you read this? Oh, it's a big deal. Life magazine, all this stuff. And I can only say that every time you want to really score with the reviewers, write a book showing mother as monster, battling and battering the poor, sensitive psyche of a young youth. Of course, most youths are young, but not necessarily so. I used it not wrongly there. Battering the psyche of a youth growing up in the hard-bitten world of New York's Upper East Side, where money is thick and rich and where the privet hedges are impenetrable. Now, I must say, there has to be a time. There must come a time. Of course, it will never come from the radio. I'm perfectly aware that anybody on the radio is considered a kook and not qualified to talk about important things like writing. But there has to come a time when somebody is going to have to give a rebuttal. And I'm not talking about a pro-mother rebuttal, which, of course, it'll automatically be called. I am forced to believe, not coming from this section of the country, that the mother monster is almost totally a product of Eastern writing circles. I'm forced to believe this. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't millions of monster mothers in the Midwest, but the mother as monster is not singled out from all the rest of the monsters in society in general. Now, do you follow what I'm saying there? That the mother as monster, I believe, is a product of a certain culture and a certain ethic. I must say, I think that Sigmund Freud belonged to that ethic. And I know this is going to be misinterpreted in many circles, but I do believe very strongly that the mother as an overpowering figure is largely an Eastern, particularly a New York concept. That very few of them are ever seen west of Rahway. I mean, it is a fact. And I have read so many of these novels. In fact, I've read all of them that I could lay my hands on, ranging all the way from Salinger through Philip Roth, through Friedman, and so on, all the way up and down the line. And I find that almost invariably they focus on the mother as a giant protecting envelope who is attempting at all points to control and to mold and to create almost an entire image of the child, the family, the entire unit. Now, it's never pointed out, at least I've never heard any reviewers point out, that this is not a universal, certainly not a universal problem. And in fact, I must by way of rebuttal, I must say that one of the phrases that my mother constantly used when I was a kid was "fight your own battles." That was the end of it. Fight your own battles. You'd come home with your eyeball hanging out. You'd come home with one ear half chewed off. You'd come home with your knees skinned, and with 18 guys pursuing you right up the back steps into the... I remember coming running up the back porch one day with Farkas and 9 of his cronies after me. They chased me 19 blocks. I staggered up the back porch, busted down the screen door, fell gasping next to the icebox. Farkas belted me twice, and then turned around and ran back out, and the only thing my old lady said was, "Fight your own battles." All right, I'm convinced this is not an Eastern mother. You agree with me, Skip? Not at all. Now, I'll tell you another thing. No, I'm serious. You will not find any of this mother problem running through Hemingway. You won't find it running through F. Scott Fitzgerald. You'll find a lot of other things, but you won't find that. And I'm not saying that these writers are better than Salinger or have a closer grasp on reality. Let's put it this way. The reality of their world is different from the reality of the world of the Salingers. That the mother did not have that kind of attitude towards her children. The protective attitude is and of course, it's interesting to see that so much of this is coming out of Eastern magazines, too. Almost all of the parent magazines are created here in New York. Very, very few of them come from other parts of the country. And so they're almost always the product of the same ethic. It's fascinating. I can remember when I was a kid listening to programs that would come out of New York, family-type shows, where the mother was the big, all-enveloping type character. Say somebody like Ma Goldberg, Mrs. Goldberg. This was the kind of mother we never had. There was no mother like that in any of the families I knew. Very few. I will say this, however, that there were one or two, maybe three out of all the kids I knew who had mothers who protected their kids, and they were considered real oddballs. I remember Mrs. Van Hoos, who for years kept Tommy from playing baseball and football because, quote, well, I don't want him to go out and get hurt. Well, she was considered a real nut and an oddball in our neighborhood, and apparently it's quite the other way around here in the East. I'm just wondering what kind of an ethic this comes out of. Now, it is not that I'm attacking one ethic. Now, I must say this: I'm not attacking one particular ethic and attempting to replace it with another and saying that this ethic is better than that ethic. I'm merely saying it is extremely different. And so, and I can also say this, that if a man ever gets up and says in the presence where that ethic is strong, in the presence of people, if he ever gets up and says, yes, but mothers aren't like that, he is considered an apologist for motherdom, which is a terrible, terrible thing to be. I mean, it is the world's worst thing. And he can be very truthful in saying that. I can remember another time. Of course, these things go on, and I don't recall more than 4 or 5 occasions in the entire time that I went to grade school up through high school that I even heard of a mother coming to school to complain about the treatment that her child was getting at the hands of those terrible, ferocious teachers. And apparently that seems to be a big thing in the East. It really does. Now, if you're going to say to me, well, things have changed, I disagree completely. Things have changed. Oh, no, it's not all over. You're wrong, see, because you're from the East. You think it's that way, too, in Milwaukee. Well, let me tell you, more than one kid right now is saying amen, listening to this program in Lexington. I'm sorry, it is a different ethic. I'm sorry. Oh, sure. You would see, because I believe that we get the impression that things are changed all over because that's what we read. But where do we read it from? Where is it published? Madison Avenue. It's published by a bunch of guys who grew up under the umbrella of Salinger, and the guys are all living in Darien and over here in Bronxville, and they're writing about what's happening in Idaho. Well, I'm not so sure. Don't really. I think one of the great mistakes we make in this country is to believe it is one country. We like to believe that what we read in McCall's is what is happening all over the country. We like to believe that what we read in the New York Times is what is happening all over the country. I am sorry. Having come from another part of the country and incidentally having still close contact and ties with that part of the country, I can tell you that many of the reports are fallacious. I'm sorry. That it would. Now I'll give you a little example of that. Just last year, I had a friend who was teaching school and had taught school for 15 years in a Midwestern town. He got a chance to come east. He wanted to come east. There were a lot of reasons. One of the reasons was he was working on a PhD. He wanted to come out east and finish his work on it. And he was working in a high school. So he came east to work in this high school. And I'll never forget, this is just last year, I'll never forget having a drink with him over here at the Blue Ribbon on 44th Street. And he's distraught. He's out of his mind. After 3 weeks in an eastern school, he said, I don't know what this is about. Every 20 minutes, there's a parent on the phone wanting to know, what's the matter with John? He came home today and he looked very unhappy, and he's now not saying anything. He's in his bedroom. What are you doing to him? And he said, what do you mean, what am I doing to him? The idiot doesn't know anything about algebra. Look, get him on the stick. And they say, what do you mean, get him on the stick? This kind of talk. And he says, for crying out loud, he said, within 3 weeks, he is out of his mind. And I might point out, after 1 year, he had it, he quit, he's through, he's left the whole scene, and now, as far as I know, he's back in the Midwest, and he's happily teaching kids again, rather than kissing their little you-know-whats, which is a very different process. Speaking of kissing little you-know, this is WOR AM and FM New York. Hit the little thing there, will you please, Skip?
Welcome aboard, sir.
Who is the ale man?
Your stateroom is ready, sir.
He could be you, a man with a thirst for a manlier brew.
The captain would like you to dine with him.
3 out of 4 men every time choose the bolder, keener tasting ale.
Can I get you anything, sir?
Valentine.
You thirst for adventure, for something new. You try a Valentine ale. This one's different. Bolder, keener, more to the point. Suddenly, you're a confirmed Valentine ale man. Welcome aboard, ale man.
Who is the ale man? He could be you, a man with a thirst for a manlier brew. 3 out of 4 men every time choose the bolder, keener tasting ale. Valentine.
Now, to carry this little discussion further from my reading and from living that I have done around the country. I've lived in the South, by the way, Skip, in case you're interested. I lived for a considerable time, long enough to know something of the ethic, both in Florida and in Kentucky. These are both, of course, Kentucky is not truly a southern state, but certainly Florida is. And I found that up to a certain point, but with certain very distinctive variations, this ethic also holds good in large areas of what they often call the Old South. Of course, the reasons for this are manifold. And the South, in its own way, worships women the way the Eastern ethic worships women. You'll find that most of the theater in the East is based on the worship of women. That the most important part of a play or a movie or a show is about the girl. What about the girl? The love for a woman seems to be the most difficult thing in the world to obtain for an Eastern writer. I mean, really, it's like chasing Moby Dick. It's like chasing the white whale. And it never would occur to somebody living in large parts of Wisconsin or Indiana or Illinois that it is difficult to have a woman who loves you. This is just accepted as a normal, natural state of affairs, that either she does or she doesn't. And if she doesn't, too bad, there are others. And that's the end of it. But out here, of course, it seems to be the subject for fantastic breastfeeding, particularly in the work of, say, people like Arthur Miller. I went down and saw After the Fall, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, why doesn't he just say, well, too bad, baby, there's others, and go out and get one? But instead, breastfeed, oh, but I love, and it goes on and on. This can only come from an ethic that worships at the feet of women the way other ethics worship at the feet of golden calves. It's a fantastic thing to see, and yet no reviewer ever points it out, that this is a localism. Down south, it's also the same thing. You see it running through the works of Tennessee Williams. It runs through almost all of the Southern writers in one way or another, but it's a different, very, very different, though. If you look at it through Williams worships ancient ladies. You might say the Mother Emeritus is what he worships at the foot of, and fears too. And that's not quite the same as the Eastern ethic, who worships at the foot of the operating lady. The one who's really in business. Now you'll find this running through almost all of the Eastern writers. I'm fascinated by reading some of them. I'm fascinated in the sense that it is hardly ever pointed out. And of course, I can only say this too, that why this seems to be a universal today, and it does seem. Most people look at me blankly and say, well, what do you mean? That's throughout all writers. Well, I can't agree. I think that that today the novel writing art has largely left most parts of the country, with the exception of the South and the East. Very few novels today come out of Iowa. If they do come out of Iowa, they are incomprehensible to the Eastern reviewers. Hence, you will never hear about them. The only other kind of novel that comes out of places other than this is the superficial, you might say, topical novel. The novel of politics, Eugene Burdick'sville, let's get rid of all the Democrats. Or look out, look what they're doing. They're selling the secrets to the Russians. This kind of stuff. But you will very, very rarely find any of the more serious exposés of the jangling nerve ends of the human soul, as they're always described in the blurbs, coming out of, say, Minnesota, or out of Iowa, or Indiana, or Wisconsin, or Ohio. They come out of right here, and they will be out of right here for a long time to come. Because for the very first time, I think, in American literary history, almost the entire world of communication is controlled and is, I guess, is part of. It's not only controlled, it's like a godhead that has grown out of the body of New York City. In short, you're probably aware that so many of the book reviewers, what the New York Times says about a book is as important in Hessville, Indiana, as it is in Staten Island. You're aware of that all over the country, the New York Times book review is read as the Bible. Now, who writes the New York Times book review? Well, it comes from 43rd Street over here. And so you'll find, and here's another interesting little slant that they've got on book reviews. It's a fascinating thing that I think should be pointed out. That you take the New York Times book review section, and also you take the Herald Tribune book review section. Almost all of the reviews in those book review sections are written by novelists. Believe it or not, this is the only field in the world where one man is called upon to criticize the work of another man, both in the same field. This produces, of course, a vastly incestuous situation. And so if Salinger is called upon to review, he would never do it, I guess, but Philip Roth is always reviewing books. If Philip Roth is called upon to review a book written by a guy from Iowa who does not hold that the mother is the all-encompassing monster, naturally he's going to think it's an idiotic book. He's not going to like it because he literally believes that this is the way life is. And he will say, this is a namby-pamby apologia for blah, 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 blah. Never understanding, of course, or apparently wanting to, that this man's attitude towards family life in Iowa is based on his life and is really is very realistic. He's talking about a different ethic. And so we produce in this country an incestuous kind of writing where writers are continually talking about other writers, and gradually the field has narrowed down now to the point where only one kind of writer can survive in American literary circles. One kind. He has to have a certain attitude. He has to have a certain viewpoint towards life. He has to have a very definite, bounded viewpoints that are clearly understood and are in a very definite way are decided upon before the fact. Now, this also certainly holds true in plays. How many plays do you ever see that were, let's say, written in Duluth and about life in Duluth? Once in a while, you'll find the heart-rending, the soul-reaching, searing drama of the Midwest, written by, say, an Inge. And yet, oddly enough, Inge, who is part of the American Eastern theater complex, will be applauded because he's one of the very few Midwestern writers who shares attitude with the Eastern writers, and so naturally will be applauded. He, however, has shifted, you see, His attitude, which comes from a certain kind of Midwestern ethic, holds that the father is the evil one. The father is the evil one in his ethic. Now, you'll very rarely find this in a good Eastern writer. The good Eastern writer's father is a little shadowy man who sort of says, "Well, what can you do? What can you do?" This is the Eastern father. This is the Eastern symbol. This guy runs through practically all of the novels of the Eastern genre. Now, it is not often pointed out that so many of these things are true localisms. Now, they may not be necessarily localisms, but let's put it this way: they're ethnic writing. They have a specific point of view that it rises out of a certain ethic or a family structure, which is not necessarily universal. The assumption of universality can be very, very easily made because, again, of that incestuous quality of American reviewing, American communications, American attitudes. I picked up the other day a copy of a Midwestern book review section. Now, this comes from one of the better papers in Chicago, and they have a section just about like here. They have a section like the Trib or the New York Times has. And it was fascinating to read two books being reviewed by literate men. One book being reviewed by the New York Times and by Life magazine, the same book being reviewed by a Midwestern reviewer, and both of them are diametrically opposed in their conclusions about the book. The book in particular that I'm talking about is the book by Friedman, the most recent one. What's the name of that again? I forget the name. Anyway, it's the guy that wrote Stern. But it was intriguing to see the different attitudes that two literate people can have about this. Kiss Mama. Even the title tells you a great deal about what it's about. Now, the one thing, though, that I'm saying, I'm not arguing whether or not Friedman has a legitimate point of view. He certainly, obviously, does. I'm saying yes. But to assume that this is universal, to assume that this is not genre writing, is to make a great mistake about the nature of man himself. To ignore this now, and I enjoy his writing immensely. But I can only say that I disagree with his conclusions because the ethic that I come out of is at great variance. I know I would suspect that large numbers of the people who are college dropouts have been conditioned by this particular ethic. That the minute things get rough in their junior year, they want to quit. Primarily because mother doesn't seem to be able to do anything. She does not seem to be able to have any influence over the liberal arts department. And so there's only one thing you can do. You can cut out. That's all. And go home and write an angry play denouncing university life. Showing it for the sham and the fraud that it is. I suspect that the average university here in the East would be far more loved and attended if you could create the administration building in the form of a big fat lady sitting there with curlers in her hair and with a plate of strudel there ready to be served. I suspect that this would then become a loved campus. And if she could somehow stand between the sun, it's almost always the sun in these are the cases of the writers. If she could stand between the sun and those terrible people on the faculty, those terrible, awful squares from the Midwest, then it would be a fine and a wonderful institution, like Mother's Apron is a fine and wonderful institution, which is both hated and loved. I have a friend of mine who is a playwright. This guy waxes eloquent about his mother. He talks about her endlessly, and of course he's lived his entire life in the city limits of New York City. He calls her on the phone every hour on the hour, and yet hates her with a violence that I have never yet seen in a man of my close acquaintance. He hates her, and yet it comes out in an unconscious ways. Many important ones, and I think this definitely comes out of this particular ethic. Now This is the kind of show I'm sure there's going to get a lot of people uproar. There's going to be millions of phone calls about this. But I'm sorry. I'm just stating another viewpoint, and I'm not. Again, I must give you I must throw in the disclaimer here. I am not saying that the viewpoint is not valid. I am not saying that the viewpoint of Salinger, Roth, etc. is not valid. It is for their particular their philosophical structure, their particular family ethic. Fine, absolutely valid. But then again, on the other hand, what they have done, unfortunately, since they do control most of the media of communication, the reviewing circles and so on, have rendered all other viewpoints invalid. This, I think, is the prime danger. And so if a man were to write out of his knowledge of life, say in Indianapolis, unless he accepted the Eastern attitudes, his novel would be called superficial, ridiculous, it's trite, it's trivial, blah, 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 blah. He does not go into the the deeper philosophical and psychological connotations of life amid the jungle. I'm curious. Now, what this causes, of course, it causes great confusion on the part of people, also politically, too, you know. This has connotations that go far beyond the novel. If it were just a novel, I'd say, well, fine. So this little play, it's Funsville. Go ahead. I mean, what danger is there in a novel? I can only say this, though, that since most people have accepted the universal ethic, this as a universal ethic, you see it on TV shows, you see it in almost every Broadway play, almost every movie that's produced has this running through it in one way or another. It produces a great sense of non-communication and confusion in the minds of literate people when they find other literate people diametrically opposed to them in attitude, in viewpoint. And they think it comes from perversity. They think it comes from dishonesty. They think it comes from, quote, not understanding the realities of the situation. And so when a man from East 79th Street meets a man from, say, Cleveland Street or let's say from Woodland Avenue in Chicago, which is a parallel situation, a parallel economic basis, he will find the two of them generally have absolutely no point of contact, unless it be the most superficial. They're both Americans. They both spend the same kind of money. They both have the same stamps. They both drive a Pontiac, maybe. That's about it. And there's a confusion because one man has been taught from very, very early childhood, fight your own battles. That's the attitude. Fight your own battles. You're out in the world. If the world hits you in the face, you've only got one response. Either hit it back or run. But you got to do your own running or you got to do your own hitting. Now that is literally the ethic in millions and millions of homes throughout the Midwest. There is no such thing as the overprotective mother in countless homes that I know of. It just doesn't exist. And don't say, well, that was when you were a kid. I'm sorry. It's an ethic. It has nothing to do with when you were a kid. Isn't it interesting how large numbers of people think their ethic is unchanging and other people's continue to change constantly? That I'm sure that Salinger, who is far older than I am, would say to me, oh, yes, but things have changed in Hammond. It's that way now. But, of course, things have not changed since he was a boy on the Upper East Side in New York. This is one of those things that my ethic is rock-bound and unchanging. Yours is on the shifting sands of no philosophy whatsoever. So stop it. I'm afraid it ain't that simple. And that things do not change that rapidly. And throughout millions of homes, I know for a fact that the general attitude, if for example, if the father decides in a Midwestern home that the kid needs a swat across the buttocks, the mother would seriously, the mother would never think to say, oh, but poor Johnny, look at him, he's so, stop it, you beast. This would never happen. Never. In fact, she would add a couple of whacks herself. So in the end, it results, and I'm not saying it's better. Now again, a lot of little ladies are getting very angry from the progressive world of the colleges and schools. I am not saying it's better. I'm saying it produces a different kind of man. Very different. He's not better, he's not worse. He's just merely very, very different. And I'm constantly surprised at the number of men I meet here in New York City who are in their late 20s, 30s, all the way up through their 40s, who spend every available minute visiting their mother, calling their mother, visiting their mother. I never saw anything like it. It's fantastic, you know. And of course, the one great fear that they have is with their. And I've seen guys have violent arguments with their wife because the one thing they don't want is for their mother to get upset. They don't want their mother to get upset, and this seems to be a tremendous problem in the East. I'll tell you, this would vastly surprise a Midwestern mother, namely my own. Many's the time I said, "Oh, for God's sakes, Ma, will you stop being so stupid? I've had it." I don't know many guys here who would do that. It has nothing to do with disrespect for my mother. It's appreciation for my mother as a human being and not a mother. That the mystical word mother has fantastic connotations in this particular kind of ethic. And it has connotations which are far over and above and beyond the connotations in other societies. I'm sorry. It is a fact. Now, of course, there are going to be a lot of argument. People are going to write. I know I'm going to be knee-deep in letters about this thing. But it is a confusing thing, and it gets to be vaguely irritating to sit night after night and read review after review about the same subject, about the same problem, mother. And of course, the implication being, you know, I found it so fascinating to find that since the Midwest does not read many of these books, it is assumed that this is because the Midwest is illiterate. I've heard many people say, "Oh, yeah, but you know, I mean, they would never understand that in Cleveland." But that's right, they wouldn't understand it in Cleveland. Not because they're illiterate or not sensitive, but because it would have roughly the same meaning as if you were to sit down and try to read and try to associate with and try to make contact with the problems of a very special group of people living a very involved family life in Brisbane, Australia. Now, would you be called illiterate because you couldn't make contact with that? Would you be called insensitive? No. You'd simply say, and you'd refer to it as that. You'd say, well, this is a genre novel. It's a novel about a specific way of life, and it's a specific way of life that has validity there. I find it interesting but not moving. I find it that way. That's the way I find most of the novels that I'm supposed to be moved by. Interesting but not moving. And I'm sure that if you spent your life living over shafts on East 65th Street in the shadow of Central Park, you would find every last word written by Philip Roth profoundly moving, because it's about you. Everyone is moved when he's written about. I don't find it so. Now, is this because I'm insensitive? Oh, yes, a lot of people will say that. Yes, it's because you're narrow, they will say. Well, do you find life on a farm in Iowa profoundly moving? No, I doubt very much whether you'd be even interested in it. Maybe interested, that's all. I don't think you... I think many of the same people who are profoundly moved by Roth would find what I tell, my stories of my childhood, not moving at all. Very superficial, mean nothing. And yet, I find quite the opposite reaction from people who have come from fairly much the same ethic. I'm not putting anyone's down. I'm just saying it's very different. And yet, we can get the impression that all ethics in America are the same. Somehow, because they read McCall's in Milwaukee, they feel the way those articles say. Do they? Well, I think one of the reasons why many magazines are beginning to go downhill in this country is because they do have that single unified Eastern attitude, that Eastern ethic runs through their magazine continually, and it just does not mean anything anymore in Columbus, Ohio. Just doesn't. They find it boring. Week after week, they pick up articles about the problem child. Week after week, they pick up articles about how to make contact with your son's homeroom advisor. You know, what is this? What do you mean make contact? My mother said, what do you mean? I get the report card every 3 months. That's it. That's contact, you know. That's the end of it. But believe me, it is not the end of it here. I'm sorry, it is not the end of it here. That if mother could go to school with the child here, she would. Sit right next to him all day long in algebra and make sure that everything went okay. Make sure that there was not a ripple in the water there. And of course, it produces one thing it does. It produces a large number of angry young men. I think the angry young men come out of this ethic. Because after mother disappears over the horizon in the general direction of Pelham Avenue or the Grand Concourse, or she disappears back towards Princeton, New Jersey, wherever she's come from, that in the end you will find the boy, the young man, is out there facing a world that is not a mother. The world is not a mother. The world is not a father. It's a world. And this drives him into a frenzy. And it does not seem to worry about him. It does not seem to care what he thinks. It does not seem to weep when it should weep. It does not become compassionate when it should become compassionate, which is generally over his concerns, over the things he believes in, over the things he wants to see straightened out. And so he's confused thoroughly, and he lashes out. He winds up being a brilliant satirist on the political scene. He winds up being a sick nightclub comic. He winds up lashing out, and all the while the world keeps right on going. It keeps right on going, and he gets more and more infuriated until finally one day the point is reached where he finally says the whole world is rotten, and he finally takes what they call in second-rate literature, he takes the pipe. Either that, or he finally becomes what they call an embittered, defeated man, living in his $200,000 a year home in Darien. Bittered about what? Defeated by what? What had he won? If he had won, what would have happened? Would the world have turned into a giant mother? What's embittered him? Well, who knows? He'll say the perfidy of a world, the stupidity of society, the insensitivity of the man on the street. That's what's embittered me. Oh, come on, get off of it. He's saying this while he's walking around on the street. Is he part of the man on the street? No, not a bit of it. Is he part of the great slob? No, not a bit of it. He's not part of any of those things. And incidentally, I hope you understand that during the recent series we did on the slob, I certainly included myself. And that's what bothered a lot of people. I got all kinds of angry letters because most of the embittered young men never include themselves. Never include themselves. They only pick out various groups that they are embittered at, and their group, of course, is the group which has the receptacle of beauty there within its own grasp. Well, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. This is getting to be, I suspect, getting to be a bigger problem in America because of the unification and the gradual defeat of the local method of and the local means of communication. In other words, almost all the publishers are in New York. Let's face it. Practically all the literary agents are in New York. I don't think they don't control a great deal of the literary world. Almost every serious magazine is published right here in this town, and it's printed by it's almost all the men who write these things. Almost all the men who publish are Easterners. Now, if they aren't Easterners, there's another interesting side issue, that many a man will grow up in Cleveland and not understand or not fit into the ethic, and he flees to New York, where he will find a comforting and a sympathetic ethic. So you'll say, well, what do you mean? The guy that wrote that piece for the Herald Tribune, he used to live in Cleveland. That's quite true. But remember, he fled to New York. This makes him a different kind of Clevelander, and I'm not giving any apologia for Cleveland. Don't hold your finger up too long; it gets a little distracting, honey. After the first 5 minutes, you know. The facts are though that in the pursuit of truth, you better be careful to recognize that your truth is your truth. It's your truth. It is yours. And I'm beginning to be a little amused by the constant confusion that arises in reviewers' minds when they don't know quite how to handle it. Like they keep saying the embarrassing, like in Life magazine recently, it says, the constant reiteration of the adolescent theme with the overbearing mother as the villain. They were handling it, but they accepted this as a truth. They did not say that this is only a partial fragmentary truth of one specific ethic. And so it becomes difficult to write about any other form of life. Now here, I'll say that for another show. I was going to give you a fascinating example of this. But I'm sure that large numbers of people listening to this program will wonder what kind of gibberish I'm talking. What is this stuff? Because I'm quite convinced, too, that the universality that we attribute to the attitudes in these various writers is not even universal here in New York. That the tempest in a teacup is literally what we're talking about. That the tiny little inbred world of Salinger and Roth, the little world of Friedman, is specifically that. It's a little world. Some people may read it for just amusement. Others read it out of curiosity. Others read it because others have read it. And it's written about in Life magazine. But very, very small numbers of people say, oh, yeah, man. Yeah, man. Go give her hell, man. Yeah. Oh, mama, please come back, mama. No. Not many at all. Not many at all.
From August 22, 1964, the Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Bank. Hillbilly radio sales. Great stories of radio salesmanship.
The radio. Turn up the gain a little bit. We'll try that. Drink Pepsi-Cola. How can they resist that? Here's another one. This one always is good. How'd you like that? The forest fire got him. In spite of Smokey the Bear and everything, he went right down the drain there. Did you hear that? Listen. It's coming closer. Help! Now, how about that? You do that, you see, you burn that for about 10 seconds. Everybody jumps and says, oh, great Scott, what's happening on the radio? They all leap to the radio, and then you hit them. Eat Wheatina. That's it. I'll tell you, though, there's a lot of things to be said in favor of direct action. And speaking of direct action, I was walking down the street the other day. I just have to tell you that New York is a very special world. And for those of you who are living outside of New York, you do not know the combative aggressiveness of the people who live in this jungle, exist in this jungle, and make it work. I mean, make the jungle work for them, instead of they themselves working for the jungle, which is a very different problem. I'm walking along 6th Avenue, and there's a whole bunch of little, this little crummy section, all little crummy stores, little bitty stores all jammed together up and down, right off the 40s here. There's between 40th and about 50th Street, there's a bunch of little stores, little bitty stores, little barber shops where it says 40-cent barbers and all that stuff, and places where they sell used magazines. Can you imagine a guy buying a used magazine, Tony? Somehow that has a certain pathetic... Depends on the magazine. Some of the used magazines they've got down there are wild. They have the whole racks of them, You don't think they were ever printed. They started out used. That's true. They're wild. You can't imagine them being sold on newsstands. But here they've got these little joints all along up and down there. And I'm walking in this great crowd, this throng of guys eating knishes and guys stuffing hot dogs in their faces and pizza pies and guys going in and out of these joints with the used magazine. There's even one shop down there that specializes in whoopee cushions. That's always a big special. And they have a summer clearance sale. It says summer clearance sale, and a big red sign says summer clearance sale, getting ready for the new fall merchandise. It's coming in, and there in the middle window is their summer clearance sale. They've got these little plastic things, that look like the dog threw up on the rug. You know, you can get all those. A big summer clearance. I'm clearing all this stuff off for the summer. Will you see our new fall line coming in? Sneezing powder, whoopee stuff, all the whole scene. So I'm walking past there in the middle of this wild scene, and there in the middle of it all, my eye is caught by an angry red sign. Angry, I mean angry. You know, little angry letters. And it wasn't the kind of sign that's a big sign. It's a sale, you know, this kind of stuff. It was an angry little sign. Boy, it was angry. Could you see somebody had taken one of these little red stencil type things that you print signs with, and that you can just see him printing it out. Boom, 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 boom. That'll show them. Boom, boom, boom. That son of a gun. Boom, boom, boom. You know, that kind of stuff. So he's pounding out the sign, and here's what the sign says. It says, in spite of what you might have heard, in spite of the talk to the contrary, this store is not connected with any other chiseler on this block that claims he is connected with this store. We are connected with no other chiseler on this block. No other chiseler. Yeah, that's it. Oh, what a ball game we're playing. This store is not connected with any other chiseler. And I walked along and I says, well, you know, somehow I could see the whole drama unfolding. One chiseler is claiming that he's connected with another chiseler down the street, and the first chiseler is very mad because he's established a whole reputation as a chiseler, and he is proud of it, and he stands alone on his chiselership. I am connected with no other chiseler on this block. All right. That's enough of that, gang. Now, of course, these New York vignettes. Of course, everybody's going to say, you know, Shepard must have made that sign up. I'm sorry. And they didn't even spell Chisler right. It's spelled Chisler. Chisler. It's something I tried to pronounce. At first, I thought it was some kind of a Greek dish. And, yeah, you know, with the grape leaves or something there, and then with the rice and the goat's blood and stuff. But no, you've never had that? Wonderful dessert. It's fermented, you know. Oh, that's great. You know, another thing has to be reported. New York has of course, New York breeds both anonymity, and it breeds guys who fight like mad to bust out of the anonymity role. I suppose the great urban complex that we're living in, just a wild scene. It's very difficult to try to put yourself into the place of a person who has never been in New York before, never seen it really, never felt it, to look at it with a new eye as a New Yorker. You live here in this rabbit warren every day, and you get you're totally accustomed to it, literally. Well, I had a friend who is an artist, you see, and he's a playwright. And he's recently got himself one of these grants where they send him up to a camp in New England to write his play. And he says it's insane. He says they take you up there. Here he's an urban playwright, you see. He's writing about the urban life. He's writing about man caught in the 20th century giant machinery that he's created himself. That's his whole bitch. And he's angry young playwright. He's bugged, the whole scene. So they come to him. They've read part of his play, and they say, well, what we ought to do is to send you to a place where you can really write your play, give you the rest and peace and quiet, the solitude that an artist really requires to do his best work. And so he's, gee, that's fine. Well, okay, we're going to send you up to this camp up in New England, this traditional ancient camp up there. You're going to get a Rockefeller grant. You're going to get the Pulitzer Prize, the whole scene, and you're going to go up there in a log cabin in the rustic surroundings where you can contemplate your navel in solitude. You can be one with Thoreau and the ages. Well, here he is. He's this angry, hard-hitting urban playwright. You know, his hair is always mussed and there's bags under his eyes all the time, and he's got old tennis shoes on, and he sweats and he's angry. So he winds up in this place. You see, in about the first 3 or 4 days, they put him into a place where there's double bunks, nobody in the cabin at all, and there's little kerosene lamps, and the breezes are blowing through, and the birds are singing out there, and the lake is lapping at the shores right outside of his cabin. You can hear the rowboats banging against the dock, and he is sitting there, and in front of him is a sheet of paper and a pencil, and he's trying to have the muse come out of the gopher holes around there to touch him with the golden wand of creativity and the burning fire of the human spirit. Well, he's sitting there on his thing, waiting for it to happen, and he's beginning to get mad. He's shadow boxing all around his little cabin. He's running around, he's telling me the truth. He says he's running to the window and he's opening it, closing it, and then he closes it again, opens it again. He runs to the door and opens it up, lets the breeze in, then closes it and keeps the breeze out. And then the birds start singing. Oh, shut up, birds! And then for a couple of minutes, shut up, birds! All right, you birds! He's throwing shoes up at the birds. Then he sits down again and he waits. He's got his piece of paper there and he's got his pencil out waiting for the muse. Nothing. Then he hears the rowboat. Shut up, rowboat! Will you close them rowboats off? Turn them off, something. He waits and then plop, 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 plop. The water's going. You know how water goes. It just goes. It goes night and day, plop, plop. It doesn't care whether you sleep or not. The water's going plop, 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 plop out there. It's lapping up against the dock, plop, plop, plop. Will you shut the water off, you bum? He's hollering at a little kid down there walking around, with an inch or two around him. He says, shut the water off. Plop, 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 plop. So it's the urban playwright. You see, he is beginning to blame nature on man. He literally is blaming the birds on the guy in the next cabin. He is beginning to blame the lake on the guys that are walking around with the striped bathing suits down there, Well, he sat there for 5 days going out of his SKUL, out of his skull. And I said, what's the matter? What was wrong? What was wrong? I said, was it the birds that was doing it? Was it the clouds? Was it the blue sky? He said, no, I couldn't find the enemy. I couldn't find what to get mad at and write my play. Well, to make the story short, he came back to East 7th Street in the middle of the sweltering heat and the yelling and screaming, guys throwing rocks through his windows, fist fights up and down the stairs, they could hear him screaming and throwing beer cans into the air shaft, and now he is happily writing away once again. He is in touch with the muse. All together, gang, bring it up. So don't tell me you don't like this sweat and steam, this fist-fighting, yelling city. I mean, it's right there, and you're a part of it. You're as much a part of it, believe me, as those butts, those cigar butts and those beer cans squashed into nothingness on 6th Avenue. And that sign that says, I am not connected with any other chiseler in spite of all the talk. I am not connected with any other chiseler on this street. In the great baseball game of life, my friend, what position do you play? Are you a beautifully well-coordinated, integrated fielding first baseman but no hit? Are you a utility infielder, forever destined to sit on the bench, waiting for somebody to bust his leg, who will never bust his leg, but forever sitting there waiting to get the call that never comes? Are you a hard-hitting, slugging outfielder with narrow, slanty eyes and big, heavy, black sunglasses, squinting up into the sun, a 420 hitter who is slumping to 395? Is that your role? Well, if it is, you're not listening. I can tell you that. You're at Sade's, where all the big dough is. Yes, indeed. So if you think you are, you ain't. You wouldn't be here, Dad, if you were. Nobody worth his salt is listening to the radio at this hour of the night. I can tell you that. And I can tell you this. Nobody worth his salt is doing radio at this hour of the night. Bring it up. What do you mean? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. That's the truth. Bring it down there. Speaking of saltness. The saltless. This is WOR AM at FM New Yorkie. And, we're here. WOR AFM and FM New Yorkie. Do you have the thing in there? All right, belt it.
A song of love is a sad song. High lily, high lily, high low. What a beautiful song. High lily, high lily, high low. It's the enchanting theme from MGM's film Lily, which will be charming New York once again. Lily, starring Leslie Caron, is coming back to the Translux 52nd Street Theater, where it played for 93 weeks. Life magazine says it's a total delight. And Newsweek adds, it is one of the most ingratiating motion pictures imaginable. The thousands who remember will bring other thousands to share the pleasure. All New York will be in love with Lily once again.
For crying out loud, that's coming back. Let's see. 62nd. Oh, wait. Lily starts its 94th. It starts its 94th week? What kind of jazz is this? Hey, MGM or whatever it is, Translux, what week is Birth of the Nation now working on? Crying out loud. It starts its 94th week tomorrow at the Translux 50. So that's a new attitude towards coming back, isn't it? It's never been away. It's only been up on the shelf, gathering a little dust for a while, friends. But now it's back, starting its 90th. The house that Lily built. It's Translux, 52nd Street and Lexington Avenue. Boy, I'm going to lose my shirt here one night saying things like, that's terrible. I love that. I really, though, that there is the true ad man's attitude, all in full blossom. And I'm not making any comment on the picture of Lily, which is a fine picture, by the way. I'm making no comment. But isn't it interesting that the picture has been away? How long has it been gone? Has not played here for over 150 years. And you know, here it is. They bring it back, and it played 93 weeks when it first was around, which was about 10 years ago. And now it's starting its 94th week. It's never been away. It's been in our hearts all along. Well, wait till Buggy Whips come back, fellas. Starting their 10,423rd year. Oh, man. You know, speaking of, since we might as well face head on this problem of being involved in the great anonymous city, which we are, of course, we're it's funny how many people will write to me, and they'll write from places like Bathhouse, Maine. Oh, yeah, they'll like Dismal Seepage, Ohio, all kinds of places they'll write to you from. And these are guys who were, you know, New Yorkers and stuff. They've been making the scene here for years. And all of a sudden, they've finally achieved the very thing that they've wanted, that little chicken farm just outside of Elyria, Ohio. You know, that little rotten, crummy pest house that they've always wanted to live in. They have finally made the plunge, and now they're living, or else, one guy wrote me a great letter. He says, for all of my life, he says, I've been wanting to open a little roadside restaurant and bookshop and kind of a souvenir place. And so now here he is. He's festering on the side of some old decrepit turnpike way up in New Hampshire. He finally made it, you see. And he finds that his lifelong dream is something that he hates worse than life itself. He finally made it, and he can't admit it to anybody. He wrote me a letter, and he says, you know, he says, my wife is all the kids. He says, everybody's up here. He says, I've got grandmother. I got the whole scene going up here. And he says, for 20 years, I was telling him that I wanted to have this place up in New Hampshire. He says, I'm up here, and I'm going out of my skull. I'm breaking out. My skin is popping out. I got pimples all over. He says, it's terrible. He says, and I can't tell anybody how much I hate it. He says, you see, what am I going to do, Shep? Well, I don't know what. You know, what are you going to do when it turns out that your lifelong dream turns out to be a real Led Zeppelin? That your lifelong dream turns out to be a real dud. I have known guys that pursued chicks for 5 years, Tony. They finally got them, and it was like being married to an electric fan in heat. I'm telling you, I never saw anything like it. These poor guys chase these chicks, and all of a sudden, right into the machine he goes, you know, and he's screaming and hollering. He's human coleslaw all over the floor, yelling, and, you know, and nobody's even bothering to put mayonnaise on him. And there he's all over screaming and hollering. And for years, you know, a guy will not concede that the very thing that he's been aiming at all of his life turns out to be the one thing he shouldn't have had. The one thing that he should never have gotten. Oh, listen, I'll tell you, I knew a guy whose whole world was built on if he had money, it would work. I'll tell you the true story about this guy. If he had money, it would work. And he was always plotting. I would come into the radio station, he'd be plotting. He'd be sitting next to the water cooler, you know, with notebooks on. He's writing stuff down. He's always working. He's always had a gimmick going. He was always starting a little ad agency in his basement, you know, that kind of stuff. He was always saying, say, listen, if any of you fellas would like to invest in any life insurance, well, I've taken on a line of life. He was always working, always working. Well, one fatal night, a few years back, about 6 weeks before Christmas, in the cold, hard, bitten, whistling, screaming winds of winter, this guy thought of an idea. He was going to sell plastic banks on the radio. You know, the kind that you put a nickel in, they light up, little jukebox banks. And I can remember his commercial went like this. Friends, have you ever envied those friends and neighbors of yours that seem to be able to save money and have fun doing it? Have you ever envied those friends of yours who have saved up for those trips to Bermuda, who have saved up to buy that wonderful new Pontiac Tempest? Have you envied those friends of yours and yet you've never been able to save a cent of your own? Well, the little Roy Acuff Jukebox Bank may be just the very answer to your prayers. All you have to do is put a nickel into this little jukebox bank, and she plays and lights up just like a real jukebox, and you'll sit there all night long feeding nickels into it. And by the end of the week, you'll be able to take that trip to Bermuda. You must be absolutely satisfied, delighted, or your money back. Send your name and address to Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Bank in care of this station. Well, now, you'd think a nutty thing like that? You'd say, oh, come on, Shep, I'm telling you the truth. This guy somehow latched onto a line of Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Banks. Tony's looking with great interest. He wants to know what happened. Well, let me tell you. He came down to the radio station. He's one of the announcers, you see. He came down to the radio station, and he talked to the manager about it. And this is a giant radio station that specialized in that kind of junk. They sold it all over the Western Hemisphere. You know, they were selling everything. They were selling Roy Acuff genuine, guaranteed, simulated plastic wallets. Now, I don't know whether you've ever seen simulated plastic, but let me tell you, that's wild stuff. It's the only stuff I've ever known that dissolves in the rain while it's still dry. I mean, right in your pocket. Well, they were selling that kind of stuff. It says you must be absolutely satisfied or your money back. Of course, there's different degrees of satisfaction, you know. And there was always a little argument over that. But nevertheless, this guy went into the manager and he talked to them. And of course, all of us are sitting around laughing, you know, ha, 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 Roy Acuff Bank, ha, ha, yuck, 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 yuck. Well, the manager somehow respected the light in this guy's eye, the maniacal light. And he said, well, you know, all right, we'll give it a try, Rick. And so, sure enough, Rick came in the next day with his little money that he put down for the first couple of commercials, and the radio station was going to go along with him. And he ordered his first little case of Roy Acuff Bank, you know, and he's sitting there waiting for the orders to come in. And he orders 144 Roy Acuff Banks. I'll tell you exactly what happened. And so that night, guess who comes on the air with the yeah, that's right. Guess who comes on with the commercial? He comes right to me and he says, Shep, he says, you realize that my family fortunes are riding on this. He says, we've got to go over this thing together. Because, you know, I'm just, I'm as skeptical as the next guy. And I'm doing this terrible, rotten radio show. It's all kinds of hillbilly music. So after this guy he says, and it was the wall-based cannonball. I say, there, you've been listening to the Delmore Twins. And now, folks, if you've been envying those friends and neighbors of yours who've been able to save money, who've been able to enjoy saving money, if you've never been able to save money in your whole life, well, we have the answer for you. It is the Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Light 'em Up Bank. Send your name and address to Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Bank. This little bank sings and plays. You just put a nickel, a quarter, a 50-cent piece in this bank. It lights up like a real jukebox. It plays real jukebox music. And you'll be saving money and enjoying yourself at the same time. What? Well, of course, I'm in there. I'm belting this thing out, and I'm sweating away. And all the while, I'm laughing. You see, the engineer is sitting there with that you-know-what-eating look on his face, you know, looking at me like, well, boy, where do we take Rick over the coast? And Rick is standing in the control room. Rick is the announcer whose whole world is riding on this commercial. He is standing in the control room, and he's looking he's looking in at me like hit it, Shep. So, I say, all right, I'll go over it again. I say, yes, friends, you must be absolutely delighted. You must be absolutely delighted, or your money will be returned without question within 10 days. Just send your name and address. I will repeat it. Just send your name and address to Little Roy Acuff Bank. I will spell that Little, Little Roy, R-O-Y, Acuff, A-C-U-F, Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Bank. And you know how to spell Jukebox Bank, friends. Send your name and address to this station, and you will receive your Little Roy Acuff Jukebox Bank in just 3 days. Postage paid, absolutely guaranteed, and you can begin to save money right that very instant. You could be on the way to a college education. You could be on the way to a brand new Tempest convertible automobile. You could be on the way to a vacation on the sands of Bermuda. Send your name and address to Little Roy Acuff. Well, I'm going like mad in there, you know, and I'm just getting carried away by it, and the hillbilly music is playing and the band is yelling and hollering. Well, I go on to my next commercial. Of course, my next commercial is something like, friends, have you envied those friends and neighbors of yours who have been able to raise chicks and chickens without any trouble? Well, the Little Roy Acuff Tennessee Chicken House will guarantee you 100 chickens without culls, sex guaranteed, mail to you postpaid any place in the United States. Just send your name and address to Chicks, C-H-I-X, Chicks, and I'm going on, you see. Oh, yeah. Oh, my favorite one of all time, though, was Friends. Have you ever envied those neighbors of yours who come back with the back end of their car just loaded with fish, and you have not been able to catch fish for weeks on end? Well, the Little Gypsy Fish Bait Oil Company is now making available to you a secret oil preparation that was developed by gypsies wandering over Romany Europe many centuries ago who had to catch fish or die. And this gypsy fish bait oil is guaranteed, friends, to be an absolute fish killer. And in many states, it's illegal if they find out you're using it. Just dip your worm into Little Gypsy Oil fish bait, and by George, those fish will be leaping into your boat. You'll have to be beating them off with an oar. Well, I love that one. You can see I could have turned a pretty dollar in this racket. Well, let me tell you what happened. We're all laughing. Everybody's walking around. We're all hitting each other. We go in the announcer's lounge. You ought to see the announcer's lounge of a hillbilly radio station. That is a sight to see. I'll tell you. You can smell it for blocks away. Well, of course. I mean, it's just hitting pretty close to home. I mean, there's two types of hillbillies. I'll tell you. There's the real one, and then there's the guy that has the boat out on Long Island, but has the same taste. But oh man, that's close to home there. But it's a fascinating bit. I'm walking in around the announcers' lounge, and of course we're all laughing. All these hard, because you know one thing about really swinging PI announcers, guys that really work the field. I'm talking about real workers in the vineyard of radio sales. These guys in New York City, they don't know nothing, I'll tell you. I'm serious, poor old Dan McCall. These guys, they couldn't sell their way out of a paper bag. You get a guy working on a great big 50,000 watt station way out somewhere in the deep south of the Midwest with the modulation at 145%. It all turned up, cranked all the way up, and everything's mushing out. All you want to do is get the message out, belt it out. It's the station itself is designed to penetrate radios that haven't worked since 1928. I'm serious. Believe me, some of those radio stations, even if you've got 4 burnt out tubes and it's a 5-tube radio, they come in on S9. They just boom right in. In the modulation. And friends, I want to tell you, the quilt lady guarantees 250 pounds of genuine quilt parts. Genuine, beautiful, cut quilt pieces that will produce our prize-winning, fair-winning prize quilt in just 4 hours and 27 minutes. Send your name and address to quilt. Well, it's this kind of thing. See, Circleville, Texas. It's real selling, and you're right down there. You're right down there in the bedrock, the real bedrock of Americana. You are dishing it out, and they are loving it. And you got to understand that's something that very few people know about this kind of selling. And I'll tell you this as an old practitioner. This kind of selling is also entertainment. That you listen to a real good pitchman work, and he's as fascinating, I'm serious, he's as fascinating as a Broadway play. He runs the entire gamut, too. He runs the gamut of hope and success, fears and failure, love and sex. It's all there. Yes, friends? Have you envied those neighbors of yours that are riding down the street in the sunshine with a beautiful blonde sitting next to them? Well, the little Acme Loan Corporation will make it available to you just $300 on your signature only, and you will be able to buy yourself a new convertible, just $1 a week and $1 down, and for the next 25 years you will have that blonde sitting next to you with those striped tartan plaid seat covers. Well, it's this kind of thing. And so the whole thing about it, I must say this to any announcer who is interested in this concept. Selling is only secondary. Entertainment is primary. You have to entertain the guy who is going to buy, and if you entertain him enough, he'll pop. That's all there is to it. And I don't mean by the records that you play either. I'm talking about the way you sell the jazz. And it's got to be sold not only. Did you ever see the movie The Rainmaker? Did you ever see The Rainmaker? Well, one of the best movie performances I ever saw was Burt Lancaster in The Rainmaker. And he almost, this guy's fine. I refuse to concede that Tony Perkins is a better actor than Burt Lancaster. I'm sorry. If you saw Burt Lancaster in The Rainmaker, you know exactly what I mean. that the people loved being bilked. They enjoyed it. He came to town, and the one thing he did was entertain them. And even though they knew that they were being taken, even though they knew that they were being peeled, even though they knew that they were all marks standing around there, they loved him for it because he gave them something in their lives that they had not had. He came out there. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered about those great stretches of nature just out there on the other side of the hills? Have you ever wondered what it is that causes rain? Well, I can tell you right here, as I stand right before you, that by tomorrow night I can have that rain a-coming down from that sky. I can have those clouds a-forming up over there. Well, I mean, you know, who cares if it rains after that? I mean, the rain itself is an anticlimax. And believe me, a guy getting a bottle of Little Gypsy fish bait oil, it's an anticlimax to the dreams and the hopes and the wild schemes and the beautiful images that the Gypsy fish bait oil salesman conjures up. It's showbiz. Believe me, you walk into the theater over here. I'm serious. You walk into the theater, you pay $9 a head. You get in there, it's been written about for 6 months by the Times. You walk in, and there's those giant gold lame curtains, and you sit down, and you're in this big seat, and the audience is all dressed up with furs and the whole scene, the Cadillacs and the Rolls Royce. Who cares about the play after that? That's a drag. Many a guy, believe me, would just as soon do without the play. Seriously. That is totally a drag. It's all the packing. It's all the packaging. And so I'm sitting in there that night, and I'm selling that thing. I says, friends, if you've ever envied those friends of yours who've been able to save money, you know, the kind that just puts money away and they go around with that big grin on their face, and by the end of the year they got enough money to go down to Bermuda. Have you ever envied those people? Well, the little Roy Acuff Bank, Jukebox Bank, will provide the answer, the means for you to save and enjoy it. Can you just see yourself sitting there, putting a quarter in, and it starts to sing Roy Acuff's favorite ballad? Yes, sir, and the Red River Valley, it's singing away to you, and it's lighting up, and you've saved yourself a quarter, because at the end of the month, you open up the box, and you're milking your own jukebox. Yes, sirree. Yes, sir, you can have your cake and eat it too, friends. Well, I'll tell you. So you didn't know that I could do this, did you, Tony? Well, I'm sorry. WOR thinks I'm not commercial. So that I could think, oh, listen, I could go through that morning. I could go through this WOR schedule like a lawnmower going through dandelions. I'll tell you. If you know, sometimes when you've had this kind of experience, it's like a fighter. It's like a guy who knows how to, a real tremendous fighter. And you know, he gets into a bar and he sees everybody standing around the bar, all these fat guys and these little short guys and these big rubbery guys, and they're all getting a little tough. You know, they're drinking their beer and they're pretending they're fist fighters, and they walk around and they yell and holler at the mirrors and all that stuff. He knows that all he would have to do, you know, would be just to work one end of the body, then you know, hit the heads together and start on the booths, you know, and then throw the whole crowd out on 6th Avenue with one big fell swoop. Well, you know that feeling? Well, I have come up in my past, which is somewhat checkered, through a school of radio that did not fool around. I'll tell you. It was a very different world, I'm telling you, than the good guys over here, you know. The very different scene than you know, somebody politely breaking into the Martha Dean show to tell you about reading the New York Times. Very different school. Now, sometimes I listen to the radio guys and I feel like that fighter. You know, that fighter that goes into the bar and he knows he can lick everybody in the house, and he just doesn't do it. Because it's not that he's a better man or anything. His experience has been different. He's been trained, you know, in a different school. He's been trained, you know, what to do with your elbow when you're infighting. He's been trained just exactly where to hit a guy with your thumb when the sweat is at its worst. You know, he knows all these tricks. He could reduce, really, seriously, a little 142-pound fighter, I mean a guy can reduce a 220-pound Green Bay football tackle to absolute coleslaw in 2.5 minutes. He really can. And that's just the fact of it. And so I sit here and I listen, you know, and I say, well, I prefer not to do it. I prefer not to come on. All right, friends, have you ever envied those neighbors of yours? Have you ever? Listen, you guys out in Staten Island, Have you ever looked over to Brooklyn and says, oh, boy, someday? Well, let me tell you, friends, if you start reading the New York Herald Tribune tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., if you start and get off the mark at the right time of the day tomorrow with your eyes bright and clear and shining, if tomorrow morning you start out with Walter Lippmann, if tomorrow morning you start out by reading Peanuts, if tomorrow morning you start out with a lead fist, yeah, let them fight you then. Well, I'll tell you. Well, it's a very different school of selling, you see, but oh boy, is it effective. And so I do this bit for the guys, and we're all standing around in the control room. We're all drifting back on it. Of course, you see, these stations are devoted only to one thing. Absolutely one thing, mail pull. Absolutely, there's nothing. Ratings, they never heard of ratings. What are the ratings? What do you mean? All they want to know is how many bags of dollars are in those gigantic mail sacks that come in every day. You know, I saw this radio station. This will curl your hair. I saw this radio station on one Monday night after a particularly wild Friday, Saturday, and Sunday weekend of pitching with a large number of new offers, new gimmicks, new things, ballpoint pins that light up in the dark and play the rosary, all kinds of wild things. Oh, yeah. Do you think I invented that one? I'm telling you the truth. Lumescent ballpoint pens that guarantee and constantly remind you of our Creator as you work away there at your account books to remind you. Can you imagine a guy making out his income tax with a ballpoint pen that lights up and says, "Thou shalt not steal"? Oh, they're very effective. Well, that's the kind of stuff we were selling. So we had this big weekend, and the following Monday afternoon, the mail had come in, and in our mail room was $242,000 in $1 bills from one weekend of pitch work. You know, the kind that says, do not send your name and address. Be sure to send in $1. $1. There is no postal page, no prices, you know, that kind of thing. Send in $1. Well, we had 242 G's. There were 3 Brinks guards at every door to the mailroom. We had them regularly every day there at that radio station. So if you think this was small-time radio, forget it. This station usually knocked down maybe, on an average, I would say, it would draw in mail about $1 million every 10 days, roughly, in absolute cash, of which it got 50% in cash. It just siphoned. It didn't work. PI means percentage of inquiry. It did not work on buy 15 minutes for X dollars, 15 minutes or 1 minute spot costs X. No, sir. It was PI. In other words, the station went into partnership with a guy, and if he drew in $10 million, they got $5 million, sent him the $5 million, his $5 million, and they went their way, Well, anyway, here's what happened to Rick. Rick, has been plotting and scheming all the time. It's his whole world was this garden that he was tending all of his life. That one day, if he hit it big, oh man, wow, would he be, it would be great. And so he's always working with his notebook, and he's always selling insurance, and he's always selling a used car. He used to come up and say, listen, fellas, if any of you need a watch, there's nothing like a pitchman selling other pitchmen pitch junk. And that's one word, by the way, pitch junk. And we'd buy. That was what was so discouraging. Oh, yeah, he'd come in, he'd say, listen, fellas, any of you need a watch? I have here. And he'd reach down into his checkered vest pocket. I have here an Elgin watch. Now, let me tell you this. I don't want to tell you exactly where this watch came from. I suppose you guys will understand this. There'd be 5 of us snapping at that thing like a smallmouth bass batting away at a basserino. I'm telling you, all of it. Let me see it. I bought more cardboard Elgin watches than you ever could. Believe it or not, I'm serious. You know that gimmick. You get an Elgin watch case and you put a Mickey Mouse Works in it. That's what you do. And some nights when the sun is shining right or the moon is up right, you can see the little Mickey Mouse hands on it, with the little yellow mittens and the gloves and the little Mickey Mouse shoes and stuff. Yeah, and there it is. It says Elgin, 23 jewels. All 23 jewels are in a pawn shop 400 miles away. They ain't in your watch. And so, it's this kind of stuff. Well, so this big day arrived. I did his big pitch. I did the big thing. And, of course, the whole point is to wait till the next morning. And we're saying, boy, will Rick get it this time, man. Oh, man, he's going to learn this. This is a hard field of road. We're all hitting each other. And it got to be a gag. And we'd go down to the little gypsy diner, you see. We'd go down there and somebody'd say, hey, you got your jukebox bank with you? Listen, I'd like to buy a quarter from you. And somebody would reach down in his pocket and take out a jukebox. We all took to carrying them around, you know. We'd take them into the joints and we'd put a quarter, doing, 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 we'd go. They actually played. They played hillbilly songs. And you could have your choice of them, like Old Rattler, Red River Valley. You could have your choice of what your jukebox banks. And so the next day, I came in, and every announcer, this is the kind of thing that made you really, really be on the stick. Every announcer had just exactly the way, you know how they post the batting averages every day? They post the Yankee batting averages and the Met batting averages. Do you know that every day at noon, every announcer's announcement, his record, how much mail he pulled, was put out right there for all to see. And you would lead, you see, you would jockey up, and boy, is it terrible to be on the bottom of a 5-man staff of pitchmen, you know, and there it is, you know. And every announcement is keyed, so they know, you know, it's like, send your name and address to Department 1A. That means Old Shep, you see. Or Department 2B. That means Charlotte, you know, and so on up and down the line. And so that day I came in, and I walked in, and there was the chick sitting there at the reception desk, and she says, congratulations. I said, what do you mean? She says, have you seen the chart? I came in at noon. I said, no, what do you mean the chart? I figured, you know, Gypsy Fish Bait Oil finally broke through. So I go in there, and whose name is leading all the rest? Shepard drew 17,923 orders at $3.95 each for Roy Acuff Jukebox Banks. And Rick is on the floor unconscious. He's laying in there. He has 144 lousy little jukebox banks to send out, and he's got telephones going all over the country. Plastic plants are turning out jukebox banks everywhere. And the manager is taking him down to have a crab dinner. The whole thing, all of a sudden, he's a gigantic tycoon. He is no longer on the schedule. He is walking around wearing $7 shoes. He's a sensation, fantastic thing. Well, within 6 weeks, this guy was in more trouble than you could shake a stick at. He had union guys calling on him with blackjacks. He had people who mailed things. He had rapping guys working on the whole scene. He had tax men coming in and out. There were guys carrying violin cases that looked like they could have had something else in them. And every night, Shep would come on and say, have you envied your friends and neighbors? Well, at last reports, that guy is living in a hut in Canada. But he's a happy man.
From August 29, 1964. Sponsored by Sustaining, Palisades Park, Show Magazine. The program originates from the Limelight, New York City. Evading the issue. Shepard's first day at high school. Miss Crystal Reader in biology class. Mr. Pittinger teaches algebra. Well told. The Show Magazine commercial features, Beware of TV's Election Monster, an article about the use of computers during the coming election. The 11 o'clock p.m. News, read by Ed Pettit, features stories about the Beatles, who are performing tonight in Queens. There has been rioting in Philadelphia. Fleischmann's Yeast, the story of M.L. Scott and the girls' swimming pool. The Song of the Signal Corps, Great Shep. At the Tool Booth. An enjoyable show. The recording includes the start of The Amazing Randy Show following. Plus Shepard began his radio career in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1948 as a broadcaster and later landed a late-night show broadcast in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Gene got the nickname, Shep, when he was working at WOR Radio in New York City. At his overnight radio gig in New York City, Shep told stories, read some poetry and also organized stunts for fans who listened every night.
Gene Shepard from the Village Limelight.
That oscillating, moving, quiet saucepan of farina out there is bubbling and hissing. Shall we drop just a little brown sugar on it? Shall we call them to worship? Or shall we point the way to the fiery furnace? Which one of you would... if you had your choice, and they said 2 doors marked heaven, hell, and you were given your choice, and you're standing there, which way would you go? In there you hear the sound of lutes playing. You hear the sound of heavenly choruses, singing on and on. And over here in this door you hear, woo! Woo-wee! Woo! There you stand, you know, faced by the reality. Which would you pick? All right, folks, all together, all of those in favor of the whoopee hollowers, let's hear it. right, let's go. Hold it there. Hold it, everyone there. Grab a hold of the handlebars there. Easy now. Get your mitt out. But who wants to knock out some flies tonight? How about a game of catch? Okay, there are the two doors. One marked heaven, the other marked hell. In fact, I suspect that most of us today would consider it a rotten, dirty, calumnious lie if we arrived at that great bar of justice beyond the pearly gates. And they look down at you and they start going through that big book. They look right at you. They say, well, you're here at last, aren't you? Yes. 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 And he looks down with that great flowing white beard and says, let's take a look at your record. Do you remember April 13th, 1949? No, actually. April 13th, 1949. He says, well, we remember it. Let's see. Do you remember July 7th, 1953? A 1951 Mercury? You were in the front seat on your way to Howard Johnson's. Do you remember that night? He said, yeah. Oh, it was great, yeah. There's a quiet pause. And then that great figure looks down and says, okay, take him to heaven. You look up. Wait a minute. Suddenly you feel cheated. The others knew something you didn't know. Suddenly their sin was more dynamic than yours. By the way, wouldn't you like to be the first in your neighborhood to discover a new sin? I mean, before they made it illegal. You know, and you're in there quietly, you know, in the front porch there, next to the swing, performing your own sin. And they don't know about it, you're trying to hide it, and then you try to get it patented. Everyone wants to... All right, stop it, Donner. All right, now all set out there, Marty? All right, eins, zwei, vier. Yes. All right, now. All together, gang. Let's hear it with real hate. Just pour it out of those nice, friendly American faces. Let's hear it! Excelsior, you fatty! Hold it. Oh, at ease! When I say at ease in this outfit, I want you to shut up. All right, parade rest. And now, WOR, recognizing the fact that it does have a public responsibility, and also recognizing that its public responsibility does not stop with merely telling you the time of day and the weather on the John Gambling Show, it recognizes that there is nothing needed so much in this world than a genuine escape valve. Something we all need in this day of the dynamic nice guy. Do you know that millions of kids in schools everywhere are being taught to adjust? To be friendly little guys. Oh yeah, they're no matter what happens, they got to understand it. And so this little lout comes up to him. And by the way, how many... this is a man thing. I'm looking at nothing but the men. I don't think this happens to the women. How many men in this crowd... Oh, every one of you had to have it. That fantastic, unforgettable moment of truth that is right with you now, sticking to the ribs, you know, like oatmeal. That moment of truth that happens to every male when some guy comes up to you on the playground and says, all right, knock it off. Knock it off my shoulder. Come on, knock it off. What's the matter, you chicken? You know that moment, men, when you either got to knock it off the guy's shoulder or else forevermore carry a fantastic load of guilt. How many guys here in this crowd didn't knock it off the shoulder and tried to understand Well, I understand that you are a product of an aggressive environment, you say to Bolus Rakowski. And he said, what was that? And you say, well, I don't believe in violence. And at that moment, you start picking teeth out of your ears. And you know that terrible feeling of going home after this public disgrace and arriving home, your shirt is torn open. There's dirt on the side where you landed in the cinders, you know. Your elbow is belted and bulging out. You got a cut under your eye. And your mother says, you've been fighting. You've been fighting. You've been cringing. I'll tell you, there's very few fighters in this world. There's a lot of duckers. There's a lot of guys that try to hide under the cinder tracks. And I don't think women have this. I don't think they know this problem. Well, I received a note about 3 days ago that said that next week is National Back to School Week. How many little squirts out there in the darkness are waiting? They see that day coming, der Tag, you know. It's coming closer and closer. Of course, girls love it. Somehow chicks almost invariably love it. This is part of their world because somehow I think the world of understanding things and loving things and being sweet, getting your own way with your own little stainless steel fangs, hidden under gold lame. This is the girl's world, really. It's a girl's world. Oh, it ain't that way out on the playground. Believe me, the kids are fighting for every inch. Have you ever gone to your right for a ground ball and some guy sticks out his foot and down you go? And he stands there looking at you. Yeah. National Back to School Week. Let us, for one brief moment, consider the terror that is being felt by millions of little kids right now, knowing that they are about to be publicly disgraced. Have you ever had the feeling that life itself is a continuing pattern, a continuing process of attempting to evade embarrassment? Just to stop being embarrassed. That's what education is, really, you know. If you can learn everything about Greek literature, they'll never embarrass me. You don't give a damn for the Greeks, you know. What do you care about the Odyssey, the Iliad, nothing. Somehow, if things get rough, you can say, well, as Aeschylus said, attempting to evade the issue. Guys learn to finger paint. People go to movies. Millions of people go to plays every week here in New York to prevent the embarrassment of not going. Now, to admit, honestly to admit, I think Albie is, what is this? Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Come on. Who wants to say that? And so it goes. Well, tonight, I decided, before we got on the air, to try, because I'm so tired of books where they talk about how beautiful it is. Your happy days are childhood days. Forget it. Oh, man, these are the scariest days of a guy's life, and you know it. But we never admit it. And I can remember one of the things that I will carry forever, and I think most kids today miss this, because schools are almost all devoted to one thing. Don't make the little lout feel insecure. When, as a matter of fact, that's what he needs more than anything else. Because I believe this is an insecure world. I mean, that's the way life is, Lightning bolts, thunderstorms, hail, Mack trucks, fist fights in the dark, the whole scene. But when a kid gets out of school today, he's not prepared for it. Well, I came out of another world. I came out of Mr. Pittenger's world. Isn't that a hateful name, Pittenger? Just think of it. Say it yourself, Pittenger. Pittenger. This isn't Wally Peepers. This is Pittenger. Well, Mr. Pittenger taught algebra at Hammond High. And Mr. Pittenger had one of those bland, it's hard to describe, the kind of iron gray hair that's cut low. He had absolutely no emotion. None. I don't recall one moment Mr. Pittenger ever smiling. But I do remember one thing about Pittenger. He'd stand up by the board. He had this kind of a stance, and he just looked down. There I am, you know, sitting about 28 rows back. My name was S, you know. Guys, I think a whole lot, have you ever noticed a whole lot of people never get ahead because their names are at the back of the alphabet? I'm serious. In all schools, they sit you by alphabet, and if your name is X and Y, you never heard of a president whose name started with Y, you know. It's never going to work. You're too far away from the board. You can't see anything. You're faking it all your life, you know, and you're way back there, and you're sitting back with the X's and the Y's and the W's and the, you know, and there I am, way back with the S's. And I could just see this shadowy figure standing up there. Speaking of shadowy figures, that was interesting. So soon yet already. What's happening out there? Well, I remember all summer. Now, because this show is going to be directed particularly to kids that are making the transition from grade school to high school or from high school to college. When you're in 8th grade, you know, you're an 8th grader. You've made the scene. You know Mrs. Bailey. You're the top kid in grade school. There's a feeling of you're on top of it. Well, this was the way it was when I was in 8th grade. Everything worked. I was the biggest kid. I was a short, fat kid. Was wide. I weighed 205 in the 8th grade. I'd just push guys over, just go like that. Yeah, a short bullet head. I'd hit them like that. And I was on the 8th grade football team. Just hit guys, you know, a little short run. It was like a little bowling ball with feet, you know. And I was, you know, my mother always referred to me as Husky. You know how the ads say the short, stout, husky lad. Actually, they mean the little, short, fat slob. And, you know, too many helpings of mashed potatoes and red cabbage. They're eating away. So I'm this little fat, and I just hit him, you see. Well, all of a sudden, it's that great summer. I'm out of grade school, and I'm about to go into high school. Well, I'm all excited. You know, that fantastic excitement. And the high school was all the way across town and was a big one. 3,000 kids, one of these great big brick plants with a football field. You know, that whole scene. I came out of this little grade school where they had buildings called portables. You ever seen those little wooden buildings, you know, and things? Everything's under control. And there at the other end of town was Hammond High. And, oh, this is a big thing, right? It's about 3,000 kids in the school. Tremendous school. But yet, the reality of life in 8th grade had not yet seeped in. I thought it was an extension of Mrs. Bailey, my 8th grade homeroom teacher. You know, was a little short, fat mother type. She'd sit up there, you know, and she was always crying and things like that. Oh, yeah, that kind of thing. And she knew us all by our first names and knew our mothers and that whole scene. You know, it was just like going from one mother to another. And Mrs. Bailey would sit there in her dewlaps and wiggle, and she'd look down. Well, school was a pleasant, warm thing. And I got the card about this time of the year, the registration card, and it said, "You are now registered in room 220, homeroom, Miss Snyder. Report to Miss Snyder, 8 a.m., the day after Labor Day, which came on a Sunday." And there it was, you know. Already I'm behind, you know. It says report at 8 o'clock, and somehow the name Miss Snyder sounded like Mrs. Bailey, you know, Miss Snyder. Well, at 8 o'clock, I'm sharp, I'm dressed in my best graduation suit from 8th grade, you know, with the tinfoil tie, the big wide one, standing there with the whole scene. Why is it that mothers believe that they should dress a kid up on his first day of school, thereby scarring him for life? How many guys dress up their first day at work? And so I'm all dressed up, and I'm wearing this little short coat and the whole scene. I'm fat, you know, and I arrive. You know, kids that are fat don't think they're fat yet, you know. They really don't. You know, you're not aware of these little subtleties. And I arrive at school, and here is this fantastic thing, and it was before the day, by the way. Mothers did not believe in going to school with the kids. Never go to school with the kids. And her whole attitude was summed up in one thing. You made your own bed, lay in it. You graduated from 8th grade? All right, go. Go on. Go to Hammond High now. You asked for it. Go ahead. So I'm standing there on my way to school. Well, at 8 o'clock, now I want you to just try to, for a minute, it's very difficult, to remember the inscrutable quality that the world has to a 13-year-old kid. It's inexplicable. It cannot be explained. It's monolithic. It's giant. And particularly when you run into the outside. Well, I arrived at Hammond High, and millions of kids, big kids, you know, the big guys with the sweaters. And, you know, because after all, the difference between a senior in high school, who's maybe 17 or 18, and a 13-year-old little round bowling ball arriving is a tremendous. You know, these guys, you know, and they're all, get all the way, kid, you know, they're walking in. And they got the chinos and the sweaters, and I'm wearing this little graduation suit. There's a whole bunch of other little squirts sprinkled in there, you know. And once in a while you'd see a familiar terror-stricken face in the crowd. Hi, Al. And you see him crying. Hi, and you sort of cling together, and they say, where are you going, Al? Alex Joshua, who I hated in grade school, you know. I'm clinging to Joshua. I said, where are you going, Joshua? He says, I don't know. I got a car. Room 117, Mr. Harris. Somehow I thought, you know, all the kids went to the same place, you know. Well, there we were, immediately thrown without any question into the outside world, that swirling, fantastic world of the organization. And I arrive on the 3rd floor. I mean, the school had 3 floors, you know, millions of guys going up the elevators and stuff, and they're spreading out and fanning out. I'm looking, and guys are chicks. Oh, wow. I can't describe to you the impact of high school girls on a 13-year-old kid who's, I mean, real high school girls, you know, they've been around there for a couple of years, you know, and you're used to Esther Jane Alberry, you know. And somehow you're in the grown-ups world. You're with the people, the big people that tell dirty stories. You know, they say, "Hey, kid," you know, and you pretend like you know. You know, oh boy, sitting in the back of the school bus, and the kids are telling the rotten stories, and you're going, ha 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 ha, and you don't know what it is you're laughing at. And they're belting you. Well, there I am. You see, in room 220, and sitting at the head of room 220 is this little, gnarled, completely self-contained lady who had run homeroom classes since about 1905. 400,000 kids have come through her own little assembly line, and she didn't relate to any of them. Just sat there. I've got my little card. It's 8:15, and the bells are ringing, and kids are all, the cool cats that have been there for years are sitting back there. Hey, Chuck, for God's sakes, hey, what you doing around? Looking around, way in the back. My name begins with S. I'm in the last seat already, and I'm trying to make contact. And Miss Snyder gives us our indoctrination. It consisted of this. All of you will come up now and get your registration cards. You seniors, you juniors and sophomores have registered last spring, so you'll get the cards and the classes that you've registered for. The incoming freshmen will be given their cards. You're already assigned to classes. All right, now, starting with you, Abel. Come on, let's go. The kids get up, and they're that nice, wonderful, easy, casual quality of the people who know the jungle. Have you ever taken a new job? And all those people seem to know everything. It's all smooth. I'll bet a lot of you sitting right here in the limelight feel a lot of these other people sitting around know the scene, you know? This is their scene. And so these kids all get up and they walk through and they get the cards. And I get this card. Let me tell you what happened. It scarred me for life. I get this card. And it said the first hour had it all listed, 8 periods of classes. And at 8:35, Shepard was to appear at Biology 1. Biology 1, it's a freshman course, Biology 1. And next to it said Miss Crystal Reader. This is not exactly the same as arithmetic. You don't want to say to Miss Snyder, what is biology? And right after that, it said Algebra 1. Algebra 1. I am saying that for the full import to sink into any other ex-victims out there. X plus Y equals 1. Determine the value of X and determine the value of Y. D over X is equal to Y over C times L equals 17. Well, it said Mr. Pittenger. These names were just names, at that point. Mr. Pittenger, Mr. Pittenger. Miss Crystal Reader. Then there was somebody named Mr. Harris who Josway tangled with. And then at just before noon, it said swimming. Miss M.L. Scott. I repeat, Miss M.L. Scott. Well, I had an inkling something was a little wrong, Even the creature that is unschooled in the jungle knows, Oh, yeah, we're all human, I said, well, I'm just a little kid. I'm sitting back there, and the bell rings, and everybody goes. Boom, they go out. There's that great... And I'm in the hall. The next thing I know, and the kids are running. My mother had given me a notebook. What are you going to do with a notebook? Notebook. I got a notebook. So I'm on my way to Biology 1. It's like, here it comes. I'd stand there in front of it, and there's the room, number 17, and you can smell the smell of a biology laboratory. It's like an old gym in heat. And that's spelled with a G-Y-M. It's not Jim. We know old Jim. It's all right. He's been in heat since he was 12. It's okay, friends. This is terrible. I don't know what's the matter here. So I'm in... Here I am, with Miss Crystal Reader. Now, in my high school, they had teachers who were diametrically opposed to the grade school teachers. Miss Crystal Reader, do any of you... Now, it's going to sound like I'm inventing this. I'm telling you this is the God's honest truth. Do you remember The Bride of Frankenstein? I'm serious, with the hair that sticks up. Well, Miss Reader had hair that stuck straight up, and it had a white streak down the middle. And she was maniacally involved and, in fact, in love with the Anopheles mosquito. Oh, yeah, it's the only thing that made her go, She'd talk about the life history of the swamp. She had a thing. Well, I walk in, and it's completely opaque to me. I'm sitting back there, and the kids, and she's talking about notebooks. She's talking about workbooks. They don't have workbooks in 6th grade. Talking about laboratory. She says, you got to get a laboratory notebook, workbook. Go down to the bookstore, get number 16, ask for the laboratory workbook number 1. And I'm sitting there. She pulls down the chart, and she says, now, the first thing that we're going to take up, I want you to get your workbook. First thing we're taking up is the mechanics of reproduction. Which is something I had been wondering about, And I thought for the first time, school's making sense. This was not quite like civics. It was... And so she says, all right, and by the way, she was the kind of lady, whenever she mentioned certain things, got very red. And so she says, the quality... Now, all right, she says, now, all of you are going to get your workbooks, and on Friday afternoons, we'll have a laboratory session. Well, we'd had a few lab sessions up to that point in 7th grade. I'll never forget one night after. But there it was, and it's the feeling of being totally inadequate. Have you recognized within your own experience, there's always at least 9 people in any new situation seem to have been there before? You know what I mean? You go into a typing class, and 8 kids can type 40 words a minute already, automatically. They got, You go to an English lit class, they've read all of Shakespeare. And they're on speaking terms with the teacher, first name basis, right away. And there's about 9 kids have made the scene. They're all saying, oh, Miss Reader, would you please, blah, 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 blah. And she said, yes, I'm glad you asked that, Chester. Chester already, it's Chester, and I'm back there, this little blot in the horizon in the darkness, next to the mosquito tank. I'm sitting there. By the way, speaking of mosquito tanks, what radio station is this, friends? AM and FM New York. By God, it's New York. I don't want anybody to mistake it. This is the Big Apple. Well, I'm sitting back there, just completely opaque. The whole first class goes by me without any context at all. Nothing. I'm just in a world. The second class comes up, and let me tell you, it was diametrically opposed. Now, I'm not inventing this. I'm telling you an actual story of the first feeling of imminent disaster. And total failure is looming over the horizon. And it's coming closer and closer to you like a Greek tragedy. It's like an enormous iceberg coming at you. You can't go either way. It stretches 20 miles. And I walk in and I sit down in a class. There were 36 of us. I remember distinctly because of later developments. And standing up in front of his desk with arms crossed is Mr. Pittenger. This was the first male teacher I had ever had. Up to this time, it had been a succession of Miss Baileys and Miss Fifes, and now Mr. Pittenger. I come in, and he's just standing up by the desk. Up to that point, incidentally, I had developed, as a kid, a tricky little look in my eye, which made my Aunt Kate always think I was cute. You know how kids develop little shticks? They say, my mother will say, well, what's the matter? Can you hear out there? I just want to check the PA system. Well, we had developed, all of us kids in 8th grade, different things that made us live and exist with the Miss Fifes, the Miss Shields. Like, one kid had a great grin. Sit back there. He'd grin at everything the teacher said. You see, this was George Doppler. He was the grinner. And absolutely complete chowderhead. You know, there was nothing but cheesecake between the ears. But George got by with this. You know, and Miss Shields, I remember, she just couldn't say, "Shut up, George." She'd look at him and she'd melt. Well, I got by a kind of crooked little thing that I had developed that had always gone over well with my Aunt Kate. It was the thing that my grandmother loved, a kind of little crooked thing like this. You know, see how cute that is? Right away you love me. Look at that. The whole crowd loves me right here, you know. Immediately I'd have come out like this. I could make the Johnny Carson show with this bit. You know. They just say, "Dolly in on him, get it quick." I'd be a hit overnight, you know. You know, that little thing like, "Don't hit me, I'm little and fat, and I'm cute. Well, I sit back there, you know, and I start turning it on. Well, Pittenger walked back and forth, and I could see every kid in the class is doing his shtick. You know? Doppler is there. Yeah. You know, and other kids had little things with their ears, you know. Some girls automatically cried, you know. They became actresses, you know. It's a very famous. They sit there and cry a little bit like they're so sad about being away from home and mother, and they're in this terrible, incomprehending, insensitive world. And I'm sitting there. And Pittenger's just walking back and forth. "We're here to learn algebra." There was never any question of learning in Miss Bailey's classes. It was just a matter of being, you know. You went through it. He says, "We're here to learn algebra. Our textbook is this." And he had this little, rotten, sweaty, brown book that he began to pass out, one after the other. You know, you're used to, you know, the books you get in school, in grade school, which shows Johnny and Jill running over the hill to get 7 red apples, and it shows the red apples, you know. Well, I start looking through the algebra book for the pictures, you know. You know, a kid immediately gets a line on how rotten it's going to be by the illustrations. You know, I look at nothing. There's a lot of numbers and stuff. You know, example 1 and numbers. I'm going to. And you could see. You see, we had this school system where the books were owned by the city. You know, they were used by one generation after the other. And I got this fantastic tear-stained book. You know, you could just see it was suffering. You know, it was like some ancient runic tablet. You know, that suffering and weeping had gone into this thing. And I get this book, and I'm sitting back there, and Pittenger says, now, algebra is the language of symbols. I will now draw on the board a symbol. That is a symbol. Not one of us even knew what the word symbol meant, you know. The language of what? You know, what? We thought of guys going boing, boing, you know. About 9 kids played the cymbal in our little band, you know, back in 4th grade, you know, they hit tin cans together, you know, beat on Mother Oat tins and stuff like that, you know. He says, this is a symbol. Okay, that's simple enough. This is a symbol. Why? There's 2 of them. It's getting confused already, you know. Here's another symbol, C. Now, X plus Y equal C. That is an equation. Already my boat is down, it's sinking. The water is up to my knees and I'm bailing, you know. I'm looking up. My mother had one word for me when I left. She says, now listen to the teacher. I'm listening like mad, you know, and already I'm about a semester and a half behind. X plus Y equals C. He says, now, if X is equal to 1 and Y is equal to 2, what is C equal to? 1, what is X equal to? And he looks around, and you know that look that teachers have of looking for a victim? And every guy immediately gets little, you know, or gets very busy or very involved, you know. It's that evading embarrassment right away, and I'm very involved, you know. And he says, you, the back one over there. And he's got Joshua. Well, there is Joshua standing up, and you can see the harpoon right through him. You know, the poor little kid, he's up, he says, I didn't hear the question. Already the kid's on his way, you know. He's in Congress now, by the way. He's already got the evasive action going, you know, he's got dust flying. So I didn't hear the question. Well, Mr. Pittenger says X equals 1, Y equals 2. What does C equal if X plus Y equals C? There's a long pause. And Joshua said, 1 what? Oh, listen to him here. They're applauding to Hoodspot, his kid. He says, 1 what? He says, all right, sit down. And Joshua sits down. Oh, what relief, you know. He says, sit down. All right, now you. And he gets little Esther Jane Albury. Well, she was a weeper. And she stands up and she says, 3. He said, what? She says, if X is equal to 1 and Y is equal to 2, then C must be 3. He says, correct. Every one of us was dumbfounded. Completely. This was the first time Esther Jane had answered a question. We knew her for 19 years in grade school. Little did we realize she was in her element. And all the smart kids are sunk. Little dumb Esther Jane has got it. She's got it knocked in algebra. It's a new language, you know. And I says, what? Everything is crumbling, you know. It's like the little dumb kid is suddenly the star. The kid that's a star is suddenly a bum. I didn't know what to make, and I'm sitting back there like this, and Pittenger is walking around, just looking down. Not a flicker of emotion. What a teacher. He was great. No, I'll tell you, there was never anything I learned like algebra. It's fantastic. I do equations in my sleep sometimes. When a siren goes past, and there's a little fear, I say, X plus Y. I say, quantitative analysis, Mr. Winter. I start whipping out equations, triple equations. I can do them all, believe me. And so Pittenger walks back and forth, and he said, all right, by tomorrow afternoon, when we will meet the next time, I want you to do number 1, 3, 6, and 9. I want you to skip every other example in the first section of basic equations. Are there any questions? Have you ever had that asked you? And your questions are so big. So, the first question is, what am I doing here, Mr. Pittenger? Don't hit me, please. Please, Mr. Pittenger, are you going to beat us? Nothing. He said, any questions? There were none. Well, as we filed out, it was wild to see. It was that first feeling that it's an old familiar one with me now. That feeling of a large number of people who are with it and a small but tight minority of the lost and defeated. Guess where I was? And we all sort of walked out, and there were a lot of kids with the spring, and I was scared. Oh, boy, this is terrible. And then the next class, we go into something called Geography 1. And I'm thinking, geography is about the principal exports of Asia are rice. That kind of stuff. The principal export of America is fun. That kind of stuff. And they start talking about meanders and moraines and strata of rock. And, oh, wow, this is at school, Mom. What a time, Well, by that night, I get home, and my mother says, I am terrified. I can't tell you how fantastic terror in my gut. It's that sickness. That sickness in your gut that you're going to get called on? That terrible thing? Well, I get home, and my mother says, how was school? I said, it's fun. Just fun. She says, well, how do you like being in high school with all the big kids? It's fun. She says, well, why don't you go out and play? There I am sitting near the hot air register. The first time in my life I, honest to God, worried. I was worried sick. Well, the next day we go in, and I can't understand X plus Y minus D is equal to 4 over 2. I can't. What is this stuff? It just makes no sense. That terrible feeling of no sense, and you ad-lib it. You start writing things like XY plus 1 equal 2, and you go in the back where it says answers. And you try to figure it out from the answer how they got it, And you can't quite make it, and I get 1, and I say, oh, wow, it's a fantastic feeling. And the next day I arrive. I hand in my paper that's just covered with stuff. The kid learns very early in life to ad-lib. How many guys listening to me right now are in offices and you are phonying every last lousy report you ever made? I know guys that are phonying presentations to this day up on Madison Avenue. Just tremendous volumes of wonderful things that are happening, and they have no relationship to what's going on. They say, in the beginning there was. Well, there I am. I hand the paper in, and it comes back the next day with red lines drawn through them. And it said, work the problem. That's all it said. Work the problem. 1 right. Well, we're already now on Thursday, you see. And they have given us 3 more papers. They start coming back, and they start piling up, work the problem, work the problem. And I keep ad-libbing, and he never says a word. And therein lay the greatest trap I've ever run into. Pittenger never called anybody in. He never looked angry. He just sending the papers back. Well, it began to build up, and about, I'd say, roughly the middle part of November, I figured I was pulling it over him. That I figured I was on my way. I had passed about 3 of those little exams, they give, the little bits. The little things on Wednesday, he says, we'll have an oral exam. What is X and Y? And you answer it. You say, I'm home free. Until, I'd say, the last week of November. And it is to those kids that I'm directing this. Our grades were coming out just before Christmas. And Mr. Pittenger, one day, had written on the board 17 names. I came in, I'm real, by now I'm real snotty. I know everything. High school, I know it all. I'm out for freshman football and I'm hitting guys again, I feel real good. I come in and there's all those names, you see. I look, I'm used to my name being on lists. It's funny how kids, as they come up through grade school, develop the idea that they're always on the honor list. Whenever their name is appearing, it's a good thing. Like they're going to make the scenery for the play. They're going to do something good. And there were those 17 names. Mr. Pittenger opened the class. He said, now before we go on with the lessons in quadratics, isn't that a terrible word even now to some? He said, before we go into quadratics again, these people here on the board, please see me immediately after class. Whose name led all the rest? There it was. There was Alex. There was George Doppler. There were other poor, simple, penitent travelers who figured that their smile had done it by now, you see. Because he never did anything. He never said anything. He didn't hit. He didn't lash out. He just looked as bland. By the way, Esther Jane Albury was like 7 laps ahead of the class, and he looked as mad at her as he did Doppler. This is where it happened, the euchre, This was the final cul-de-sac. And so after the class, everybody walks out, and there are the 17 of us sitting there. Each one of us has got his thing. Yeah. He had culled out of the class the 17 phonies. And we're all sitting there, with our bit, guys that got the ear, One guy, done a funny little thing with his pencil, and we're all working the shtick like mad, And he says, all right, all 17 of you are going to fail algebra. Boom! Wow! It was like all of a sudden you're all these little bowling pins and the ball has come, Boom! We're bow! He said, you're all going to fail algebra. It was the first time in my life that I had ever failed anything. I was notable in my family as the smart one. The smart kid, they always say, he knows I built radios and stuff like that. Somehow that's always parallel with being smart. Being a smart aleck is called being smart in many families. I'd have a smart crack. Knock it off. That kind of stuff. Your father's mustache. That kind of stuff. They says, he's smart one. Say something funny, Jeannie. And I'd come up with a funny bit. Pittenger was not buying. He was, and he says, all right, you are going, the group here, he says, the 17 in this group are going to fail algebra. Now, that will mean that you will take algebra again next semester. He said, I will tell you this. If you will complete the problems and the questions and the examples that all of you have not completed during the semester, you will get a D. That means I got to do the whole semester of the stuff I phoned up, and only then would I get a D. It's like telling you, if you come here and confess, we'll only cut off your ears. What a moment, I can imagine myself going home and saying, what are you going to say? That is the, then, crux of it. Home. How many of you have hidden things from home throughout all of your life? If they really knew what you're doing here in the big city, how can you explain it, Well, there I am going home from school. Mr. Pittenger has given all of our papers back, and he has just walked out of the room. There's no mercy. There's no turning back. And so we're riding back on the bus, and here are these other kids. The kids who are home scot-free. And they're happy. Have you ever had that feeling of seeing other people that are happy, and you've got a weight on you? It's like you suspect you got cancer. And you say, look at him, he's healthy. Yeah, he's right. He's going to live another 6 weeks, you know. Yeah, you know, everybody's got, you know, of course, at that point anyway, at about 13 years old, you never think you're going to reach 21 anyway. Every kid of 13 thinks he's going to die before he gets to be 21. And in addition to that, if he doesn't, he will go blind. And when he goes blind, he will do it heroically. You know, and then they'll feel sorry. Either that or you figure your mother and father are going to die. You know, it's all tied up. And so I'm in the bus, and I'm sitting there, and ooh, wowie, what a fear. What a sick fear. The fear of that note coming home, Jeannie has failed algebra. I've been on every known list of good guys ever since I was 5. Now I am failing. And I sit back there at home eating my red cabbage and my hamburger. My kid brother is making with the, you know, that happy sound. The sound of people who are not about to die. And he's sitting there eating the red cabbage. I'm sick. I can't eat. My mother says, what's the matter? What's your food? Come on now, eat, Jeannie. Are you sick? Aren't you feeling? I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. You kids, I'm flunking algebra. I'm a rotten, stinking phony all those weeks when I sit in the front bedroom with them papers. I'm making model airplanes. I'm futzing around. I'm not doing nothing. I'm just ah! No. A phony is a phony to the last. And I'm saying nothing, Ma, nothing. Hey, wait, excuse me, Pete. Nothing, Ma. Well, the next day, I go back to Pittenger's class. I have done about 5 of the papers and have handed them in, and he just takes them without a word. Just without a word. And then, after 3 days of this, he said, you will know your grade after the Christmas holiday. Well, let me tell you, sitting next to that Christmas tree, my kid brother with the fire truck, you know, and, hey, look at that. I'm sitting there, they gave me everything, you know, and I'm sitting there, it's all ashes. Just, I remember standing in front of Marshall Field. It's so emblazoned in my memory. We're standing in front of Marshall Fields just before Christmas. It's like the day before. And you know how these department stores have these fantastic displays, the Walt Disney bit, you know, with all the 7 dwarfs, Grumpy and Doc and everything, and Santa Claus is going, ha, 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 oh, ho, 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 Merry Christmas. And I'm looking up there. And he's laughing, and you can hear jingle bells, jingle all the way. And the happy crowds are moving up and down. And my kid brother saying, hey, Ma, gee whiz, look at that Daisy air rifle, Ma. And I'm seeing nothing. I'm standing there thinking to myself that very shortly my entire family is going to hate me. That I am a pariah. They don't know what a leper, what a rotten skunk they're with. What a rotten phony. Wait till this, I'm standing there. Well, the day finally arrives. It came closer and closer and closer and closer, and finally there it was. I arrived in Miss Snyder's homeroom class, and she had the report cards. Friends, I want to ask you a question. How would it be at BBD&O or Y&R or wherever it is that you're phoning it up? How would it be if they started to give out a report card every semester? And they sent it home. It says deportment, concentration, drinking habits, you know, that kind of thing. Adjustment to committee meetings. ideas all the way down the line. Well, kids, you know, they give out these report cards, and there they are. Do you remember that feeling of sitting in a class, and up there on the desk is a pile of yellow things, just sitting there, and you know that in that pile there is the guillotine. Or maybe there's a wreath. I don't know, you know, but it's there. It's there waiting for you, and there's no escaping. Well, Miss Snyder said, all right, alphabetically, let's go. Abel. She gives him his 3 report cards. He comes up, you know, that great grin. He comes running back. He's got that smile of the junior, you know, who's really got it knocked. Sits down. Abel, Atkinson, Anderson. It's getting closer, closer. Lemnitzer, Meyer, all the way down, and all of a sudden, there it was. Samuelson, Senderman, Shepard. You know, that terrible feeling, like something fantastic has happened in your underwear. I'm walking up. She said, come on, hurry it up. And hands me the cards. And I go back and sit down. Biology 1. That's nothing, you know. I love biology with the worms and the frogs and the reproduction. This is my meteor, you know. B+. I look like this. Here it is, Algebra 1. I open it up. C. C! I'm home free! Miss Snyder, I passed! I got a C! I sat back down in my seat, and at cold sweat, I have fooled them again. I have fooled them again. Listen to the phonies applauding here. And speaking of fooling them again, we're here at the Limelight down in Greenwich Village. We'll be here for another hour. If you want to make the scene, come on down. Even now, you can hear them yelling with that fantastic sound of hate. Listen to it. We'll be, what a mob. Phonies, everyone, all algebra students here. We'll be back in 5 minutes after the news.
This is WOR New York, your station for news. Now a word from Show Magazine. Who will really elect our next president in November? How great is the influence of our computer analysis upon the nation's voters? What is the real danger of the computer to the democratic process? In the current issue of Show Magazine, noted author and columnist Max Lerner explores these and other important aspects of the use of computers in forecasting election results. Don't miss Beware of TV's Election Monster in the current issue of Show Magazine. Also in this month's show, you'll enjoy Susie, the Saucy Society columnist, as she romps through the jet set, upsetting apple carts from Miami to Monaco. And then, too, you'll preview the screenplay of the much-discussed French movie Special Friendships, the outstanding film which has been invited to be shown at the Cannes Film Festival later this year. It's all in the September issue of Show Magazine, on sale now. Look for Barbra Streisand on the cover. This is WOR, AM and FM in New York, your RKO General station. For real fun at bargain prices, come on over to Palisades Amusement Park. There are free circus acts, free dancing, free parking, and admission is still only 30 cents. Powered flight or a trip to the moon. Yesterday's dream, today's accomplishment. This is the aerospace age, and you have an important share in it. Your volunteer help is needed in many of the worthwhile projects of the Civil Air Patrol. To find out about this civilian auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force, visit your CAP unit at the Yonkers Armory, Yonkers, New York, Wednesday evening. It's 11 o'clock.
Good evening, 11 p.m. Here is the late hour news. Ed Pettit reporting. What began as a minor traffic dispute last night in the Negro section of Philadelphia has since resulted in rioting and looting with damage running to more than $500,000. The mayor has imposed a round-the-clock curfew with penalty of 2 years in jail for violation, but it's being largely ignored. Trouble continues in spite of the best effort of Negro leaders who say it's hoodlum-inspired. Here's a late report from the scene by John Schubeck.
Despite the efforts of more than 1,500 law enforcement officers, efforts to quell rioting and looting in North Philadelphia have not been successful. A rash of police injuries have been reported, and the arrest total has now climbed above the 200 mark. But as yet, it's been impossible to prevent outbreaks of rock throwing, looting, window breaking, and attacks on police. The mayor's curfew imposed on a 6-square-mile area has largely been ignored. Along the periphery of the curfew zone, where those on the streets risk a 2-year jail sentence, gangs of Negro youths have attacked tap rooms, smashed windows, and pilfered the liquor inside. The city-owned trolley was stopped and robbed in one area, its windows then smashed. Fires have been set in shops throughout the riot zone. The seriousness of the trouble seems not to have diminished tonight. With each hour of the evening, the reports of assist officer on the police radio become more and more frequent. This is John Schubeck reporting from Philadelphia.
Here in New York, 3 men were rushed to Flushing Hospital tonight for treatment of an apparent overdose of heroin. 17-year-old Richard Penn's, address unknown, was dead on arrival. 25-year-old Ronald Wilkerson, since transferred to Queens General, is in serious shape, and Thomas Vasiaio fared somewhat better and was due to be released soon. The trio were brought in from Chisholm Park in College Point, Queens. Police said it looked like an overdose of narcotics. Detectives have run into a stone wall in their efforts to obtain clues or motives for the bludgeon killing this morning of 68-year-old Miss Malvina Hayhurst. No signs of robbery, everything in complete order. The body was found on the floor of her locked apartment on Broadway in Brooklyn. 15 blocks away, 48 hours ago, the knife slaying of another older woman, 63-year-old Helen Davis, and there's speculation the 2 killings may be connected. The Beatles had the kids jumping again tonight at Forest Hills, Queens, but aside from the noise, it all passed without incident, and welcome relief it was for police, who for 2 days now have been trying to keep the girls from invading the Delmonico Hotel at Park and 59th to get a glimpse of their favorites. Next stop, Atlantic City. Lucy Baines Johnson says she'll head back to Washington before the Beatles invade. Her father was the center of a big birthday party in Stonewall, Texas tonight, where he and his running mate, Senator Hubert Humphrey, helped the assembled crowd do away with some 3 tons of barbecued meat. Mr. Johnson said he expects a rough campaign, but will not indulge in fear or smear. Taking it easy, too, is Republican White House hopeful Senator Barry Goldwater. He was skeet shooting with a rifle and bottle popping with a pistol aboard a borrowed yacht off California today, but he interrupted his leisure long enough to blast the administration for declining, as he put it, to answer politically embarrassing questions about the present trouble in Vietnam. Members of a Quebec independence movement killed 2 clerks in a Montreal gun shop they raided for weapons today. Montreal police later caught 4 of the 5 men. Turning now to sports. In baseball, the Cubs beat the Mets 4-3. The Yanks beat Boston 10-2 and 6-1. 2 French horses, Ozo and Martini II, won tonight's Challenge Cup races at Roosevelt Raceway in the Daily Double number 7 Meadowheart and number 1 Palette. Now the weather forecast for New York City and vicinity. Fair, warm and humid tonight, tomorrow, and tomorrow night, except for some morning clouds tomorrow. And Monday, according to the weatherman, should be a nice day. Present Manhattan reading 76 degrees, humidity 69%. The THI stands at 72, wind from the southeast at 7 miles an hour, and the barometer reads 30.09 inches and is steady. That's the late hour news, the 11 p.m. edition. Ed Pettit reporting. Have a nice weekend. In a moment, back to Gene Shepard at the Village Limelight.
WOR New York, your station.
Well, that's it for Air Checks this week. We will have more Gene Shepard next week. I can't always tell how long each episode is going to be, but we keep on doing this until we hit the last episode in 1977. Air Checks is normally a 3-hour podcast uploaded weekly and can be heard every Sunday on the K-Tai radio network. See you at the same time and same channel.